from Kern Government Television. Welcome to this week's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting. Originating from the County Administrative Center, located at 1115 Truxtun Avenue in Bakersfield, California. Grounded in ideas, energy, and innovation, Kern County's vision is to be a driving force for the world's fifth largest economy. And our mission is to exceed expectations of the communities we serve, changing the way they feel about government, those who manage it, and the services it provides. Today's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting will convene momentarily.
Board to reconvene. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Supervisor Peters.
Here.
Supervisor Scribner.
Here.
Supervisor Maggard.
Here.
Supervisor Couch.
Here.
Supervisor Perez.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Welcome to the Tuesday, September 27th, 2 p.m. meeting of the Kern County Board of Supervisors. We'll first hear from County Counsel Margot Raison for a report on action taken in closed session.
Good afternoon, Chairman Scribner, members of the board. This morning you met on items 48 through 53 in closed session, but there is no reportable action.
Thank you. We'll begin by considering our consent agenda. Agendas are located on the tables near the doors for anyone wishing to follow along. All items listed with a CA above the item number are considered to be routine and non-controversial by county staff. Consent items will be considered first and may be approved by one motion. If a member of the audience wishes to comment or ask questions regarding an item on the consent agenda, they may do so prior to a vote being taken. A member of the board may remove any item from the consent agenda, and it will be considered in listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board concerning the item before action is taken. So at this time, I'll read the consent agenda items. Starting on page 2 on our agenda, item 3 is on consent. On page 3, item 5 is on consent. On page 4, items 6, 7, and 8 are all on consent. On page 6, all items 9 through 11 are on consent. On page 7, all items 12 through 16 are on consent. On page 8, all items 17 through 21 are on consent. On page 9, all items 22 through 28 are on consent. On page 10, all items 29 through 36 are on consent. On page 11, all items 37 through 43 are on consent. On page 12, all items 44 through 50 are on consent. And finally, on page 13, all items 51 through 58 are on consent. So at this time, I'll ask if there's any members of the audience that would like to make any comment on any of the consent agenda items. Good morning.
Good afternoon, Chairman.
Rather.
Members of the board. I'm City of Wasco Mayor Gilberto Reina. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this item. I'm here to speak on item consent agenda number 3, but not requesting that it be taken off consent. As you may be aware, the portions of Wasco Avenue being considered for vacation today lie completely outside the city limits of Wasco and therefore in the proper jurisdiction of the County of Kern. Nonetheless, the roadway in its previous direct connection south to Kimberlina Avenue was assumed to exist as part of Wasco's circulation plan and provided capacity for future industrial growth east of the railroad corridor in Wasco. With the changes brought about by the high-speed rail project, this connection was eliminated. This unintended side effects of the project point out an opportunity for us all to communicate when projects cross jurisdictional lines. Thankfully, our colleagues at Kern County, and High Speed Rail have rallied to develop a number of practical solutions to this situation. In particular, Michael Dillenbeck, Public Works Manager in the County Public Works Department, has been working directly with City of Wasco staff, exploring ways to provide proper circulation and accommodate anticipated growth. We trust this work will result in an effective long-term plan with minimal impacts to adjacent farming activity. The City of Wasco concurs with the county staff recommendation to adopt the resolution for vacation with the noted conditions. Again, thank you for your time and consideration this afternoon.
Thank you. Supervisor Couch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor, thank you for being here. I agree with you, and I meet with Mr. Dillenbeck from time to time, and he keeps me apprised of what's happening in the Wasco area. But I take to heart your recommendations, and we all will. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Couch. Thank you all.
Thank you. Any other comments on the consent agenda? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Carl Davison, and I'm a regional planner at Kern, and I'm also here to discuss item 3. Kern is concerned that the lack of coordination between the City of Wasco, the High-Speed Rail Authority, about the lack of coordination between the City of Wasco, the High-Speed Rail Authority, the county, and the Council of Governments. COG's position is the vacation of the road will significantly increase VMT, vehicle miles traveled, based on the existing 2020 traffic count, and the removal of the 1 mile Wasco Avenue will increase 2 extra miles per trip on approximately 700 of 1,300 daily trips, and result in an annual increase of approximately 500,000 vehicle miles traveled year over year. This increase in VMT will only grow in future years as the existing industrial area to the north of the project continues to grow as planned. We're here to support the city's position to move forward. However, we're concerned about the lack of communication between the county, the COG, the city, and the High-Speed Rail Authority. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, please, on the consent agenda?
Is that this one here?
No, that's off consent. Yeah, that will come later. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. I'm Dennis Fox, and I want to talk to you about item 56, number K. It's a letter to you from some people that aren't playing with them. I may not be all that well wrapped, but I got it here. And the letter is to you, and it's forwarded to the county. You should include the sheriff in that. Sounds like the people that were involved in January 6th. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers on the consent agenda? On the items that are on consent?
Can I take something up with this room here?
If it's an item that's on the consent agenda, yes. Otherwise, public comment comes next.
Every time I was a kid, we started a meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Can we do that?
We do that in the morning. This is on the consent agenda. If you're here on item number 4, which has to do with the zone changes, then that will be coming later. Yeah. No? Not. Yeah, that. Item number 4 is off consent, so we're just dealing with the items that I read that are on the consent agenda, the ones with a CA above the item. So if you're here for item number 4, which is the request of Kern County Planning and Natural Resources for various changes in existing land use designations, that will come next. That comes after public presentations. So that's in about 3 items. We'll be taking that up. I know most of you are here for that. Sorry. I know, and I know for anybody who hasn't been here before, our process can be confusing. We understand. Okay, so this is just for last call for comments on any of the consent agenda items before I move on to public comment, which is anything that's not on the agenda but under the jurisdiction of the board, to make it even more confusing for you. Okay, all right, so I don't see any other comments on the consent agenda. I'm going to return to the board for comments or action on the consent agenda.
Motion on consent.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the consent agenda. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Thank you. Now we're back to item 1 on page 2. This is public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not on this agenda, but under the jurisdiction of the board. Board members may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed. They may ask a question for clarification, make a referral to staff for factual information, or request staff to report back to the board at a later meeting. Also, the board may take action to direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. And so at this time, I'll ask if there's any persons here that would like to make a public presentation. You have 2 minutes. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Ralph Robles. I am a veteran, and today I'm here to talk about a house on 2717 La Crescenta. It was a nice place, just a stone's throw from Mauricio's, but the owner died 2 years ago. Since then, the house has been abandoned and has become dilapidated. The wooden slate roof is a fire hazard, just waiting for a spark to start a conflagration. The palm tree next to the house looks like a fireworks candle ready to go off. It's just needs a spark to start a fire that will spread wildly. It's infested with rats, mosquitoes. One version of the mosquitoes is so small you can't see it, but you know it's there because it burns like a wasp sting. There are 2 abandoned vehicles there, and the front yard is just a dried out piece of grassland, also waiting to go up in flames. This house is a potential drug den. Thankfully, we haven't been infested with those yet. The neighborhood people have tried to get some sort of remediation from the local authorities. It would seem that this county is too absorbed in building parkways to nowhere to do their public duty. My personal theory is that someone owns the property and is using it to drive down local property values. I can see where a whole neighborhood of large lots would be very welcome acquisition for someone planning on converting them into smaller lots and selling them off.
Thank you, Mr. Robles. Your time has expired on the public comment period, but I do see that Supervisor Peters has punched in. I believe this property is in his district that you're referring to, so I'll pass it over to Supervisor Peters to respond.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Robles, as far as I'm aware, this is the first we've heard of this. I don't know if my staff's been made aware of it or not, but if you could leave your contact information, I'd be more than happy to talk to our code compliance department and look into this and see what we can do.
Okay, sir.
All right, and I believe there's some, should be somebody up in my office right now up on the 5th floor if you'd like to go up there in person, or if you'd like to leave your contact with our CAO, Mr. Alsop here. We'll get in touch with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you. My name is Steve Ponning. I used to teach karate in Mojave and help circulate for the children at the high school to have scholarships. Basically, I was a carpenter, but I'm going to read you my statement. Hopefully, it'll get there in 2 minutes. If not, my wife can speak and give me her time, and we'll finish. Housing element. This is Mojave project number 3.
This is for your statement is for item number 4. This is the public presentation.
So it's not number 4?
No, this is public presentation still. Number 4. Right. Number 4 will just be in 2 more items, and the one in between is going to be very quick.
Okay.
So it'll be just a few more minutes. Thank you. You bet.
Hi, Paul Infesti. I came up today to give a couple of kudos. One for Mike Maggard, who is my supervisor. I was very pleased to read the article about the loop that is coming along in development, and hopefully it'll be here soon. Up to about 4 years ago, I had a foot injury which kept me from walking on the bike path. But about 15 years ago, I started as an exercise program. I had the entire bike path, the main section, I had it broken into 6 segments. And then for the last one where you actually have to leave, and I was a walker, not a bicyclist, so I never tried walking from the Alfred Harrell Highway to where it picked up Fairfax over by Palomino. But I just want to say that The loop is really important. I was glad to see there was some consideration because it's always like kind of a dead end when you reach it past the half of the lake. I did do some alternative loops, but you were in middle with traffic when you might have been hit with a car or something. As someone that was hit on a car in 2015 as a pedestrian, I know that, not on the bike path, but in another place, I do know how dangerous that can be in this community. But again, kudos for that work. That is a major resource for our community, and I'm glad it exists. The other kudo I want to shout out for, I overslept this morning, so I had to watch it on TV, but Mary Bedard, I just want to say, gave a very comprehensive and transparent report today. It was very thorough and involved, and I look forward to hearing her report as was asked after the November election as well. Thank you very much, and I'm not hitting my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers under public presentations? Good afternoon.
Supervisor Scrivener, I feel that you've been avoiding me for over 2 years.
I have not, but tell me.
I've called your office almost weekly, it seems like, for 2 years.
What's your name, sir?
My name is James Bann.
James Bann.
B-A-N-N, sir, out of Mojave, California. When I call on hall ambulance service, when I'm choking on my food because I have a few teeth left grinding them after going after judiciaries and government officials that don't want to be accountable to us. Anyway, when I chew on my food, it gets stuck in my esophagus. I can't chew it very well. And hall ambulance has told me, I'm sorry, but you can't get a Heimlich without a mask put over your mouth. How do you do a Heimlich with a mask over your mouth? This has never been answered. Fauci don't answer questions. Zach Scrivener don't answer no questions. I've even called your friend, which I called this morning. And I never get nothing back from Congressman Ketchum, Congressman McCoy or McCarthy. And I never get any calls back from any of the other legislative people. And this is ridiculous. It's time to stop picking on we the people.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Wayne Rankin. I was just trying to find out what the reasoning is why we do not post any zone changes anymore on property. When a property owner comes up and says, hey, I want to change zoning on my property, we always put signs up. Everybody in the neighborhood, you drive by, see a sign in the lot saying, we're going to go from this to this. But suddenly, there's no signs up anymore. So I would just like to know why we do not post properties anymore that we've done all of our lives. Every time I've seen one, I've always tried to respond to it, look at it, notice it. But now we just rely on the post office to send out letters to us, notifying us about the property. So why? That's all I want to know is why we stopped doing it.
Thank you. I will ask our planning director for a response to that.
Well, we already had a response at the last meeting we had at planning. And the response was there's not enough properties anymore that are accessible by vehicles on asphalt roads.
That's not what you said.
So I'd like every one of you to take a look at this and tell me which one is not on an asphalt road. They're all on streets, paved by asphalt, accessible by vehicles. So the reasoning we got was not enough properties that are coming up for rezoning are accessible by a vehicle or any people. So we don't require signs no more. But everything on your agenda tonight that I've looked at is on an asphalt road.
Thank you.
Thank you. And when can we get an answer on this?
As soon as you're finished, I'll ask for one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Oviatt, would you care to respond?
Lorelei Oviatt, Director of Kern County Planning and Natural Resources. I cannot speak to who Mr. Rankin spoke to, but I've worked for this department for 27.8 years, and the county has never posted in the unincorporated areas. The city of Tehachapi may, Lancaster, Palmdale, all of these places do, the city does. This was brought before the board, and the determination was made was because the county is so large, because we have wind, because we have other issues, we do have concerns with liability. and many other cities have reported to us that they have trouble making sure the sign stays up. We are not a city. We are an 8,000 square mile unincorporated county. We do post these in the newspapers. We do mail them out to people who are on our list. If Mr. Rankin would like to be on our list for areas, he can contact our department and he would receive every notice that we have for a specific area. But to be clear, we have never posted signs in the unincorporated areas, so it's not that we stopped, we never began. And we do not recommend that we do this for the variety of reasons that we have brought up, including graffiti, vandalism, and also the liability that if a sign actually was blown down and fell on someone or was picked up by the wind in certain areas of the county, it would be a liability for us.
Thank you, Ms. Oviatt. Supervisor Couch, did you punch in?
I did, and then I thought better of it. Supervisor Maggard may remember, I think we fought this battle at the city of Bakersfield many years ago. And I know the city of Bakersfield does that, but we have not here.
And there's so many islands in Bakersfield around our neighborhoods. I mean, what, 100 feet north of this would be required to have a sign posting of it, and 100 feet south might require to have a posting of it, but not this specific area. Right? According to the islands that are all through the county.
Well, all I was going to say is it was a lot more complicated than just posting signs, because we had to come up with a policy. How far apart are they, the spacing, where would they go, different configurations of property. It took a while. If you could address every concern Ms. Oviatt just came up, it still
Okay, I just
took some thinking, and it took a while to come up with an actual ordinance and a policy.
What I heard was there was too many that were not located accessible by asphalt, and that's why they changed over. Guess I heard the wrong question. That's why I brought it up to you, and I wanted to get a final answer on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rankin. Next speaker under public comments, please. Once again, for items not on the agenda. Good afternoon.
My name is Miko Finkelstein. I live in Mojave.
Can you repeat your name? I'm sorry.
I live in Mojave Desert.
No,
And your name?
And Mojave Garden, actually. We're supposed to build that building, low-income building.
I think you're here for item 4, sir, if you're speaking about the zone changes for the housing elements. Is that what you're here for?
I cannot understand.
Okay, I believe you're here for the next item, item number 4, which is for the zone changes on the various properties, the list of properties.
Okay, I live on Bakersfield Road for over 20 years.
Right.
And
what was your name? Could you spell your name for us, sir?
Okay, my concern up there is this. Is the thing, the building over there, what you want to build. And I am by myself a general building contractor from '84, and I know very much about building codes and regulation. And also, I'm a real estate agent, which makes me know to the appraisal over there how to be. The point what I want to make here is you put over there that building over R3. Only just building. Why you don't do all the street Bakersfield Road R3?
Okay. Sir.
This is one. Okay. And second, because if you put R3, all the property in Bakersfield Road will raise up. If you know. If you understand the real estate.
Okay.
How it's manipulating.
May I ask you to do something for us? Would you leave your name and your contact information with Mr. Alsop? Because if you live in Mojave, you're my constituent, and I'd like to follow up with you about what it is you're talking about and get a better understanding of your concerns. But I don't think that we're going to be able to get to the bottom of that right here. And so if you could leave your contact information, and if you are here to comment on the housing element changes, that item will be coming up in just a few minutes. So can I ask you to leave your name, and your phone number with him?
I will leave my name.
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Something else what I want to tell you. I live for 2 years before I moved to Mojave, exactly. I live in the Housing Authority in Marina del Rey. It means Marina del Rey from Los Angeles still have housing authority for low-income property up
Okay,
there.
thank you, sir.
So I understand very well what kind of building is this, because I live in that kind of building for 2 years.
Thank you, sir. Please leave your name and
Sometimes you
contact
have bad
information.
people, sometimes you have good people.
Sir?
However, it's mixed together.
Sir, your time has expired during this period.
So
If you can
you
leave
have
your...
to be careful who you talk to.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. Please leave your
Go
name
to
and
my
phone number.
concern. What kind of people you bring up there?
Okay, thank you, sir. Please leave your name and phone number with Mr. Alsop. Thank you so much. Next speaker, please. This is for items not on the agenda. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. I am Anu Hernandez. I am a program manager with the SpiritNet, a local nonprofit. We implement the wraparound program that provides trauma-informed supportive services to children, youth, and families in our community. And in September, we observed the National Suicide Awareness Month. And as an organization, we provided training for our staff and also discussion groups for our teenagers. Now, the topic of suicide hits very close to home for me. I am a permanent resident who immigrated to America from India in 2013. When my marriage ended in 2019, I was extremely suicidal myself. I struggled with intense suicidal ideations post-divorce for about 18 months. I decided to write a book as a creative take on a suicide note, and I am a woman of faith, and I poured out my anger on God. I was going to tell the world that he was a scam artist, and that even though I dedicated my entire life to serve him, he did not protect me from pain. But as I wrote my book titled But Jesus, my creative take on a suicide note transformed into the reason why I chose to live. So today, when I sit across a young person who is struggling to choose the will to live, I'm able to tell them, and it is my great honor to be able to say this, I get it. And I know that death is sweeter in this moment. But if you trust me, and if you trust your team, and we walk this process out together, I promise you there are brighter days on the other side. And so I hope my book and my story will be a blessing to this community, and it is my honor to serve in any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments, please?
I have a quick one.
Yes, sir.
It's not to do with number 4.
Okay.
My name's Stephen Ponting again. Lorelei brought up the fact that she has a list to mail out to people when there's a project going on or something got to be done. What kind of list is that? Might I ask?
Ms. Oviatt, would you please respond a little bit more information on the list you referred to?
So we mail hearing notices to people, property owners, within 1,000 feet normally, but there is also another list. Someone can send us an email and say, I am interested in all the hearing notices for the entire county, or you can pick an area. I would like all the hearing notices for, Stallion Springs or Bear Valley or Oildale. And then we actually send the notices to those people as well. Then we have a list of state and federal agencies.
The reason I'm asking this is that there needs to be a better way of addressing the citizens in the communities, because a lot of people I spoke to this weekend never got a notice about anything, and they own property there, and it was news to them. So I remember you came to my house, Mr. Scrivener, when you were first running for office. You had your little boy here and his carrying case in front of you.
He's 6'2" now.
What's that?
He's 6'2" now.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I imagine you don't carry him anymore, but you came around and knocked.
Not that I couldn't.
You knocked on the doors and you dealt with people firsthand. That is why I voted for you, because you came out and did that. I wish everybody would spend more time walking the area. If you need a sheriff with you, fine, but walk the area and talk to the people. They're hungry, not for food. They're hungry for a relationship with the people that run things. So that's what I got to say.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other comments on items not on the agenda? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Harvey. I'm a property owner in Mojave, California, approximately near the 14 freeway in Backus Road. Mr. Scrivener, I am here to address you on a matter and then the board under number 4. You are my county supervisor. Roseman Boulevard is so tore up. I was recently rear-ended on Roseman Boulevard, right by the freeway overpass. And I don't understand because they're resurfacing both Sierra Highway in sections and Bacchus Road completely when there's big chunks missing out of the street on Roseman Boulevard, which is the main thoroughfare throughout the whole town. I'm very concerned about this. Now, I cannot tell you that I was rear-ended as a result of that, but I definitely think it could have played into it. And I'm asking you personally, as my representative, to either drive down Roseman Boulevard yourself in your own vehicle and see what it does to it. I cannot understand why they're just resurfacing the other streets but ignoring that one. I have a separate issue altogether. On a road called Lone Pine, which is the way I take when I'm going to the landfill, there is a property with at least 14 boats. And when I asked some of the neighbors that are around there, they said, oh yeah, the city of LA kicked him out of the marina and forced him to put all the boats and they paid for the property. I go, that don't sound like County LA. These boats are so dilapidated, many have fallen over, many have dumped on the property, and it is a severe eyesore. Now, apparently there's a fence around it somewhat, around the sides, but the front is not all that well. And I'm asking you to personally investigate this and why all these boats are still remaining. They'll never be waterworthy again.
Well, Mr.
We're talking many different sizes of boats here.
Mr. Harvey, will do. Your time has expired for the 2-minute comment period, but we'll do on both items.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments, please? You already spoke during public comments, and so there's one chance per person. I'm going to ask if there's anyone who hasn't spoken during the public comment period, if you would like to make any comments on anything not on the agenda. Otherwise, we're going to move on quickly to number 4 after board member announcements or reports, which I will promise you will be brief.
It's not the blue page.
Good afternoon.
Cynthia Callaway. I do have a question. Lamont District. Our roads are horrible. Since we're talking about roads, I've called the county and said this road needs repaved, this road needs repaved. Have you driven through Lamont lately off a weed patch and gone past like AM/PM and the Frosty King and all that? And the road is dilapidated. I mean, literally, Mountain View from Weed Patch to Fairfax, it's horrible. I mean, we're talking cracks that are 3 inches wide, 2 inches deep. And we need them, fixed. It's like, is it gonna get done? Or are we just gonna brush this off as, well, let's wait for another rainy season? Every time it rains, it just gets worse and worse and worse. I don't know if that's, it needs it bad. I know we're just a little town, but it seems like we're kind of getting brushed off to the wayside, I've replaced shocks, struts, upper and lower control arms on my car, and it shouldn't even needed it. 50,000 miles is because I drive that road all the time. Hitting, it's like you play Frogger trying to dodge the potholes. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, I'm waiting excuse me,
Supervisor Couch.
Sorry, I was just waiting till you finished. Could you leave your name and contact information with the gentleman in the orange tie right there?
Sure.
We will put you on our list and we will, you probably don't want to do this. Hang on, can you wait just 1 second? You probably don't want to do this today. I recognize you're here for item 4, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When item 4 concludes, would you mind going, whenever that is, I think it could take a while, would you go upstairs to the 5th floor and go to room 504?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you have the time, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers under public comments? Okay, seeing none then, we'll move on to board member announcements or reports. Anything from the board? Okay, seeing none, as promised, that was fast. Now we'll move on to item number 4, which I believe most of you are here for. This is an item under the Planning and Natural Resources Department. This is a request of Kern County Planning and Natural Resources Department for various changes to existing land use designations to facilitate future higher density residential development as required by the adopted Kern County housing element. Proposed actions include amendments to existing general and specific plan map code designations and changes to existing zone classifications located countywide. And I will now turn to our Director of Planning and Natural Resources, Lorelei Oviatt, to start us off on this conversation. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair Scrivener, members of the board. I am having the presentation made by Craig Murphy, our Assistant Director, and his team, Division Chief Cindy Hoover. Thank you.
Ms. Oviatt, let me stop you right there. There was something I neglected to read. This is in regards to interpretation. So I want to introduce our interpreter, Fernando Lopez. Mr. Lopez is coming down. Good afternoon, Mr. Lopez. Good to see you. Who is available for anyone in the audience requiring translation of the proceedings from English to Spanish. And so, Mr. Lopez, if you can determine if your services are needed at this time, we'd appreciate it.
Buenas tardes. Si hay una persona que no habla inglés, solamente español, y quieren participar en esta reunión, atrás en la mesa hay unos dispositivos, unos audífonos para que puedan participar. Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Ms. Oviatt, if you could please continue. Thank you.
As I noted, Mr. Murphy will be giving the presentation as well. We have Cindy Hoover, who is the Division Chief and leading the planning on this team. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Thank you for that introduction, Ms. Oviatt. For purposes of housekeeping real quick, although I believe our audience has figured this out for the most part, I'd like to bring to your board's attention and the public that we have a blue summary sheet that has been prepared for this hearing and is located in the back with all of the agendas. This summary sheet includes a listing of all the proposed project sites that are being discussed today, along with an identification number that can be found on the far left on this sheet. That identification number has been utilized in the hearing notices that have been sent out for this project. It has also been utilized in the staff report and is part of the recommendation. So to help facilitate public comments, we would ask that in addition to providing their name for the record, when the time comes, we would ask that our commenters indicate which project site that their comments are applicable to. Utilization of this identification number will also allow your board to make individual decisions regarding the site when it comes to your deliberations. So the project before your board today includes a series of proposed staff-initiated changes to the various land use designations on 56 parcels that are located throughout unincorporated Kern County. That totals 32 separate project sites. Originally, 61 parcels were identified for potential changes in land use designations. However, parcels for sites 1, 16, 18, and 22 have been withdrawn for consideration by the individual landowners and are no longer being considered for changes at this time. That is why you would notice that those numbers do not appear on our summary sheets that we have provided today. So these actions before your board would establish land uses that would be suitable for future high-density residential projects. At this time, none of the actions before your board today include any proposed development. If these changes are in fact approved, future development on site would be initiated by the individual property owners and not the county itself. No further hearings would be required. Internal site plan reviews and review of building permits would be done to ensure compliance with development standards. So on April 26, 2016, your board adopted the Kern County Housing Element Update for the years 2015 through 2023. That housing element is a component of the general plan and one of our mandatory planning documents that every jurisdiction in California must prepare and update on a regular basis. According to the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, which is prepared by the Kern Council of Governments and incorporated and presented in our housing element, the county has a total projected housing need over that 5-year planning cycle that would facilitate the development of 21,583 dwelling units. I would note that every jurisdiction within the county is given their own separate allocation, so that number is what would be required for the unincorporated county. When that inventory was conducted in 2016, it was determined that unincorporated Kern had a shortfall of property that is designated for that development, and therefore, as part of our adopted housing element, the county committed to identifying an additional 33.57 acres of R3 zone land to meet our fourth cycle housing need, and then an additional 157 acres of R3 zone land to meet our fifth housing cycle need. So the actions before you today are necessary to ensure that ongoing compliance with our state housing law and the redesignation of the identified project sites would implement the strategic goals of the adopted Kern County housing element. So from a land use standpoint, the general plan is considered the constitution of planning documents. In California, every jurisdiction must adopt a general plan. And as I had mentioned previously, the housing element is one component of that general plan. If the housing element is not in compliance, then the overall general plan might not be considered in compliance either. If that happens, then a number of development projects across the spectrum of land use may not be able to occur. So pages 2 and 3 of the staff report list a number of funding programs that are dependent on the county having a compliant housing element. The language in the staff report and the programs identified within that staff report was directly taken from the California Department of Housing and Community Development website. So programs that are directly connected to having a compliant housing element are the Community Block Grant Program, the Infill Infrastructure Grant Program, Local Housing Trust Fund Program, Affordable Housing and Sustainability Community Program, Permanent Local Housing Allocation Program, and then Caltrans Sustainable Communities Grant Program. Another set of funding available to the county comes from programs that provide greater incentives to applicants who have compliant housing elements. Those programs are also listed on page 3 of your staff report, and they include the Local Partnership Program, the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, Active Transportation Program, Solutions for Congested Corridors Program, and then our Home Investment Partnership Program. So on November 29th of last year, 2021, the County of Kern received correspondence from the California Department of Housing and Community Development indicating that additional measures are required to ensure an ongoing compliance with our adopted housing element. A copy of the letter that we received has been attached to your board staff report as attachment number 1. Specifically, the letter indicated that the county is required to immediately rezone 214.14 acres of land to high-density residential development. I would note that staff has been attempting to address this with the state for a number of years to make sure that we are in compliance. As part of the approval of the Grapevine project that is done by Tejon Ranch, we had a number of multifamily development project sites that were incorporated within that plan. However, after adoption, the state came back and said that because of the flexibility to allow the market to determine when and what type of development occurs at each specific location, none of that land qualified to be incorporated as it allowed for commercial development as well. I would also note that at the state's direction, we took a relook at some of the modeling that was done when we adopted our original program to see if we had any missing high-density residential land that was not incorporated into our housing element. We found a number of acres that, because of GIS overlays in which the properties didn't match up correctly, did not get incorporated. Your board took action to address that and adopt those revisions last year. When we submitted that information to the state again came back and said that they did not believe that those corrections addressed the concerns, and then we were required, and that's when they provided their letter indicating that rezoning of new land would still be required. So again, I just wanted to make sure your board was aware that staff has exhausted all of our options to address this shortfall to the extent possible, and that's what brings us to our items that we have here today. So the proposed project before your board will implement specifically Program 2.2.2 and Program 2.2.3 that is located within our housing element. The proposed parcels were identified by staff along with a few that were developer recommended, meaning that staff had either had existing applications in place or had had past conversations with property developers about their intent to potentially request necessary changes in land use to develop the project site for multifamily use. So the parcels were identified based on the following element and state law requirements. First, all parcels currently have to be vacant or underutilized. The proposed parcels must have access to adequate water and sewer supplies. Multifamily residential development must be allowed by right. Lot sizes must allow for at least 16 units. Zoning on the sites must have an allowed density of 20 units per acre. The proposed parcels are compatible with the existing airport sphere of influence zones. The proposed parcels do not have severe physical constraints which would preclude any development. The proposed parcels are not located next to or near incompatible land uses, such as active oil fields, heavy industrial operations, or incompatible commercial activities. And finally, the proposed parcels are located relatively near existing residential development and have access to amenities such as schools, healthcare facilities, and groceries. So to ensure compliance with the provisions regarding the density of 20 units per acre, I would note that staff will be bringing forward to your board for consideration proposed text amendments to Chapter 19.22 of the zoning ordinance. That is our R3 zoning district. Those revisions would make sure that we establish a minimum development size of 20 units per net acre. We are also proposing to expand some of our landscaping requirements for multifamily development that is located adjacent to residentially zoned property to help further address potential screening and privacy concerns. So it is staff's anticipation to bring that item back to your board sometime in November. So a lot of questions have come up specifically regarding how these parcels were selected. So initially, a list of 880 potential eligible parcels were identified by staff based on all the available property data using our GIS system and from our specific requests from individual property owners. Those 880 parcels were then individually analyzed by staff on a site-by-site basis and compared to the previous criteria I mentioned before. That list was condensed to approximately 100 parcels that were considered the most compatible to surrounding uses and the required criteria. Approximately 40 of those parcels were removed based on ongoing communications with the site property owners and a desire not to over-concentrate any specific planning area. So the current project includes 56 parcels that have been identified in Table 1 of your staff report, which again can be found on pages 5 through 7. So within Table 1, each site has been separately identified using a number found on the far left column, again, meaning that your board has the authority to make decisions on each site individually if you so choose. Final decisions could be to approve the request as presented by staff, to approve some modified approval that your board determines is appropriate, to deny the requested changes in land use, to continue specific sites to a later date for more specific analysis if needed, or finally, your board could refer those project sites back to staff for additional further review. I would note that if any projects are referred back to staff, brand new hearing notices would be required, and the project itself would have to go back to the Planning Commission for a recommendation before it came back to your board for any final decision. As I'd indicated earlier in my presentation, staff has provided that blue handout that is available to all members of the public in the audience. They will be able to provide your board their specific project number that they wish to speak about. So during the course of processing this request, staff received 214 separate comments. Of those 214 comments, 123 were submitted from residents, 87 of those comments were submitted from agencies, and staff received 4 comments from tribal groups. Overall, 8 of the comments were in support, 117 comments were in opposition, and 92 comments were submitted with recommendations or requirements for future development. Staff also had 3 separate petitions that were received in opposition, specifically for sites 19, 1 for site 20, and 1 for site 33. Staff also received phone calls from approximately 40 or more individuals asking questions and requesting various clarifications regarding what actions were actually before the board for consideration. So most of the questions or the concerns that received included, why were these parcels chosen for rezoning? Are all the land use changes occurring in one area of the county? Is the project going to create traffic impacts? How will these proposed changes affect my property values? Is development being proposed at this time? Will it be subsidized or Section 8 housing? Will this project affect my rural scenery or lifestyle? Is this project going to affect my privacy? How will future high-density development account for water services or increased water use? Is this proposed project going to increase crime rates and impact safety services? How will the proposed project influence our area's limited resources, such as schools and parks? And then how will the proposed project address endangered species on identified sites? So responses to each of these comments have been provided on pages 8 through 14 of your staff report. What I would like to do is take a few minutes now, though, to specifically address how staff responded to these questions, both verbally and in your staff report. So I think that I've already extensively responded to the comment as part of my earlier presentation in terms of why were these parcels chosen for rezoning. While some of the projects include both a general plan amendment and a change in zone classification, many of the sites are already designated for some sort of multifamily development. either through the existing general plan designation or through the existing zone classification. That was actually the first step that staff looked at once we found sites that met the criteria, is does that site have either a general plan designation or an existing zone classification for multifamily development already? Again, the key provisions related to the requirements for the ability for water and sewer and other associated infrastructure needs is paramount and is required to ensure that the proposed changes meet the standards of the state. For purposes of land use, all of the sites are considered to be located within areas of known or planned future development or infill to the extent possible for an unincorporated jurisdiction. Given the infrastructure constraints, the parcels represent some of the best lands available for high-density use that are available for potential rezoning. The second question, are all of the land use changes occurring in one area of the county? Again, in short, no. Selection of the parcels were constrained by the previously identified criteria, and then staff made a conscious decision to help spread out the proposed land use changes to all portions of the county that could meet that criteria, which is necessary to ensure fair housing laws are met in compliance with state law. The question about, is the project going to create traffic impacts? So any development that would create more than 50 peak hour trips will require a traffic study until our general plan or specific traffic modeling has been updated. So that will happen even if a future public hearing is not required for development on these sites. Those projects will be required to meet all of the county development standards, which include but aren't limited to dedication of on-site land, to build on-site roadway improvements, and to pay all applicable traffic impact fees in those areas that are subject to those fees. For comparison purposes, single-family homes are estimated to generate a total of about 10 daily trips per home. A multifamily unit is estimated to generate a total of about 7 trips per unit. To put that also into perspective, a 1,000 square foot commercial development, similar to a Starbucks, would generate 467 daily trips, which is the equivalent of approximately 66 multifamily residential uses. So as development occurs on site, roadways shall be constructed by the project applicant, and while changing the existing land uses may generate some additional trips, residential trips are not always considered peak hour trips. Those increases do not create substantial impacts to our roadway systems when you compare that type of development to commercial type of development. So staff believes that the existing provisions within our existing codes are sufficient to help address most of the significant traffic impacts that would be associated with the development of these sites. So how will these proposed changes affect property values? So property value is an ever-changing revolving door, I guess I would like to think of it as. It is not the department's thought that a single high-density project impacts property values when you compare it to many other factors, which include but are not limited to the existing lot sizes of homes, the existing home size, the school area a particular property is zoned in, the proximity to amenities, or county-wide or nationwide economic factors. Further, when it comes to housing, the state of California has taken considerable measures to promote development, including the approval of both Senate Bill 9 and 10. So a number of commenters expressed concern regarding the rezoning of these properties because they purchased land next to similar single-family residential designated development, and they have a desire to see that future development occur in a similar manner. So with the passage of SB 9 and 10, I would just note that the characteristics of single-family housing could be transforming as single-family residentially zoned lots now are eligible to have up to 4 homes built on them for any single lot, with limited opportunities for the local jurisdiction to evaluate such of those requests. SB 9 and 10 eliminate zone size restrictions for those homes that can be placed on the secondary units. They also reduce setbacks, eliminate the need for parking, and overall promote increased housing development within those residentially zoned areas. So because existing homes have already been developed, I do not necessarily think that existing communities will see much change. However, as new developments are constructed, I see concentrated efforts by developers to potentially design those communities in such a manner that potentially facilitates that type of multi-unit building and construction within existing single-family residential neighborhoods. Additionally, to put this question into context, according to a July 5th, 2022 article from the Bakersfield Californian, rental prices within the metro area range from a $525 per month all the way up to $2,294. So knowing this, I can only imagine that some of the comments brought up regarding property values are not necessarily related to high-density residential development, but rather a concern over government-assisted housing, which brings me to my next comment. Is the development being proposed at this time, will it be substandard or Section 8 housing? As I mentioned before, no development is proposed at this time. Future development will be undertaken by the property owner and not the county itself. Today's actions are necessary to support a range of housing needs, from government-assisted projects to market rate development, a combination of both, or even potentially some above market rate type of proposals. As of July of this past year, the median home within Bakersfield is valued at $372,500. At this price, it is estimated that buyers will have to pay $2,270 per month and earn over $90,000 to qualify for an existing home loan. So that information is contained in some of the articles that I have been provided to your board today. So the county is currently has a 1.38, sorry, the Metro Bakersfield area has currently a 1.38 apartment vacancy rate within that designated area. And then overall, the increase in housing cost, including the cost to build new homes, there is clearly a need for my multifamily housing development. You know, your board is very aware that over these last couple years, sprinklers are now required to be built into all new single-family homes. There's a lot of requirements now that homes be constructed in such a manner that they allow for solar panels to be used. Project developers themselves have to bear the cost to bring in sewer and water for every particular site, along with all roadway improvements. So all of these costs add up, and in some locations can be cost prohibitive to develop project sites at a single family level just based on the economics of developing that site. So according to the Department of Housing and Community Development, the median income for a household of 4 in Kern County is $70,700. For a single household, that median income is $49,500. So based on those updated statistics, a family of 4 earning the county median income may not be able to qualify for an existing home. So staff has included a brief from the Center of Housing Policy within your staff report. It's located under the additional materials. This brief concludes that so long as affordable housing, or any multifamily development for that fact, is designated and designed in a manner located in an area not already overconcentrated and within a strong neighborhood, negative impacts to surrounding properties are greatly reduced. Lastly on this topic, and this is from a legal perspective, according to the Fair Employment and Housing Act, the type of housing cannot be factored into any decision regarding these projects. The county has an obligation to make meaningful action to overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities, free from barriers that restrict access based on protected characteristics. Even further, that type of analysis will be expanded and required as part of our next housing element. So the items before your board today need to be looked at from a density perspective and whether or not these project sites are appropriate having that density, regardless of what type of development is constructed in the future. We have a question about, will this project affect my rural scenery or my lifestyle? Again, ruralness is somewhat of a subjective term. While some properties may not be located directly adjacent to existing developed residential or commercial uses at this time, all of the development sites are located within planned developed areas and all have appropriate access to necessary infrastructure. In other words, while it may not seem rural on the surface, future development is expected as growth continues to happen over the next 10, 15, and 20 years in those areas. Is this project going to affect my privacy? So most, if not all, of the privacy concerns have been addressed by the existing county development standards. For example, Kern County Zoning Ordinance, Section 19.80.020I, already requires that when multifamily construction in excess of 1 story is proposed adjacent to property zoned for single-family residential use, all windows above the 1st story and within 75 feet of the adjacent property zoned for single-family residential use shall contain glass that is opaque or translucent or shall be screened in a manner as approved by the planning director. Further, no balconies shall be permitted within 75 feet area for multifamily proposals with 20 or more units, which would apply to every single site within this unit. All development within 65 feet of an interior side or rear property line that abuts single-family zone property shall be limited to a height of 1 story. So development, in short, development will not overlook any of the adjacent yards, as I know that was a number of concerns that staff received during the public presentation and during our notification standpoint. Per section 19.80.020J of our existing zoning ordinance, when more than 3 units are constructed adjacent to any property zoned estate or R1, a 6-foot-high solid masonry wall shall be constructed, which of course is reduced to 4 foot within the required front yard setback to ensure that there aren't any traffic concerns. Per section 19.86030A, a minimum of 10% of the total developed lot area shall further be landscaped. So in general, there are greater safeguards for privacy concerns with the development of a multifamily unit than there are for a single-family unit. You know, clearly a single-family unit, we have no requirements or restrictions on whether it's single or two-story. And so as part of these proposed zoning ordinance changes that are coming forward, again, staff will even be furthering some of our proposals by requiring some additional screening with landscaping between these types of developments. How will future high density account for water services or increased water use? So on a project level or a project by project basis, prior to the issuance of any building permit, the project developer will be required to provide an unconditional will serve letter that would be reviewed by the Environmental Health Department for the entity that will be providing the required water for that site. So from a project level, clearly no development can occur unless there is specific water that is identified and can be made available to that site. Regarding increases in water, overall, multifamily units for outdoor purposes utilize less water than conventional single-family homes. So this also comes into one of those types of questions. Is this a project-specific concern or a county-wide concern from an issue? As growth continues, how we use our available water is a question that your board will have to deal with and many jurisdictions will have to deal with. You know, clearly, use of multifamily development uses less water when it comes to some of our outdoor watering requirements. And so that is part of the overall conversation is if we have more residentially multifamily development, that particularly uses less water than if we kept building out single-family residences at the normal pace that has previously happened. Is the proposed project going to increase crime and impact safety services? So in response to that, I would just note that the notion that high-density development will lead to increased crime is a little bit of a speculative concern. Similar to property values, a number of factors will determine crime and criminal activity within a given area, similar to those that affect your property value. Again, the question comes down to individual specific impacts versus countywide impacts as well when you look at this question on a grander level. So a number of years ago, it was estimated that a single-family home in Kern County needed to be valued at over $400,000, potentially up to $450,000, to cover the overall services that are provided from a county level, including sheriff services. The continued development of lower-valued single-family homes hinders the ability of the county to provide services when compared on a multifamily level. So again, I'm not necessarily making that comparison that if you have more multifamily, clearly you have more people, but from the notion of the property taxes that are received and where those services are provided, single-family homes actually do not generate enough taxes to cover the costs associated with all the services provided. So in a sense, from a county-wide level, when we have few more multifamily developments, we actually get some property taxes and some development that can help cover the services needed from the county as a whole, and not necessarily on a site-specific basis. So how will the proposed project influence our area's limited resources, schools and parks? Again, all of the projects will be required to pay all the appropriate development fees and or provide all of the required dedications. Nothing in these actions today would change those existing standards and requirements that are needed to develop any project site within the county. How will the proposed project address endangered species for the identified sites? Again, similar, none of these actions undertaken today would permit the future project developer to circumvent any of existing federal or state laws regarding endangered species. So in addition to those comments previously provided, staff did receive some additional comments after the staff report was published for today's hearing, which have all been provided to your board. These comments, in total, we have 30 additional comments that were received. I would note 3 of those comments were opposed, specifically 1 comment for Site 29, 1 opposition comment for Site 35, and 1 opposition comment for Site 36. Staff received 1 opposed petition for Site number 37 that had approximately 50 signatures. I would note that they did not include any addresses, and so we were not able to confirm whether or not those signatures lived within the area, but there were approximately 50 signatures that signed that petition. We received 2 comment letters in support And then we received 24 agency comments. Most of the agency comments were no comments. As you'll notice, many of them were from SoCal Gas, indicating that there either were or were not any lines, or that if any development occurs, they need to contact the appropriate group to make sure that they don't disturb any existing lines. So in conclusion, the need for development and the preservation of adequate and affordable housing in Kern County has dramatically increased in recent years. Clearly, there is a need for more housing opportunities on a county-wide basis. I understand that residents are frustrated with this process. As I expressed to them and to the Planning Commission during the Planning Commission hearing, I am also extremely frustrated with the various limitations and the project provisions that are specifically required by the state of California to implement these projects and these programs. With all that being said, I still do believe, however, that this process and the items before your board today has been a worthwhile endeavor. In general, the state of California has enacted housing laws that are built on the notion that housing is the foundation of life and opportunity. More than 3 million California households pay more than 30% of their income towards rent, and nearly 1/3 pay more than 50% of their income towards rent. Overall, home ownership rates at the state level are at their lowest since 1940s, and California is home to 12% of the nation's population, but a disproportionate 22% of the nation's homeless. In Bakersfield, recent released data shows that the vacancy rates for our apartment rentals are at 1.38% within the metro area, which is among the lowest that we have seen in decades. It's my opinion that there are so many factors that contribute to these statistics that are far beyond any specific control of our local jurisdiction. But while today's actions may not necessarily solve a housing crisis, it is definitely a step in the right direction and help to ensure that the county is doing our part. While staff believes that all of these sites are compatible, as I mentioned earlier, your board can approve and provide individual direction on a project-by-project basis. The Planning Commission considered these projects at 2 separate hearings. It is their recommendation that your board approve the requested changes to sites 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 17, 21, 23, 24, 25, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 34, 36, and 37. The Planning Commission recommended denial of sites 19, 20, 26, 32, 33, and 35. Again, I would note sites 1, 16, 18, and 22 have been withdrawn and are not up for consideration by your board today. Regarding the sites recommended for disapproval, staff did originally recommend approval at the Planning Commission, and again, we still do believe that these sites are appropriate for some sort of high-density development. For sites 32 and 33, the individual property owners have submitted proposed revisions to the original proposal, which I want to briefly discuss now. For site number 32, we have maps for 2 of these sites. So for site number 32, which is located at the northwest corner of Nord and Hageman, the property owner has requested that only the northwest 10 acres be designated for high-density residential development. The applicant down. Yep. Okay, so the property owner has requested that only the northwest 10 acres be designated for high-density residential, while the remaining 15 acres be designated for single-family residential use. This proposal has been presented to most of the nearby neighbors and in the adjacent neighborhood, and they had provided correspondence officially withdrawing their opposition to the project with that revision. During the presentation before the Planning Commission, staff recommended approval of a GPA from ER to HR on those 10 acres. Staff recommended a GPA, General Plan Amendment, from ER to LMR on the remaining 15.41 acres. And staff recommended a change in zone classification from A to R3 on the 10 acres, and then a change in zone classification from A to R1 on the remaining 15.41 acres, as shown on this map. For site number 33, which was also a site that was identified to staff by a potential project developer and is recommended by staff at the Planning Commission hearing, staff was recommending high-density residential development only for the southwestern 8 acres of the property, with the remaining acres to be designated for medium-density residential. I would also note for this particular site that the northernmost 7 acres located adjacent to the existing single-family residential development is unbuildable due to an existing transmission line easement. During the Planning Commission hearing, staff recommended approval of a general plan amendment from UER to HR, again on the 8 acres located in the southwest corner, and then from UER to HMR, which is our medium density designation on the remaining 30.23 acres, and then the corresponding change in zone classification from A to R3 on the 8 acres, and a change in zone classification from A to R2 on the remaining 30.23 acres. I would note, and as incorporated into the attachments we provided to you, subsequent to today's hearing, staff received additional correspondence from that property owner regarding the site. At this time, they are requesting that the necessary actions authorize development of the entire site at the medium density residential level. Based on the hearing notices that went out, such a request can be approved. However, I would advise your board that based on my discussions with the state, only R3 zone land would be able to count towards meeting our identified shortfall. And if the entire site were to be rezoned at the R2 level, staff would not be able to request these lands be considered to implement part of our housing element shortfall requirements contained in programs 2.2.2 and 2.2.3. Finally, regarding site number 21, this is actually a proposal going the opposite direction. That site was recommended for approval for the 10 acres, the southern 10 acres. This is site 21. So again, for site 21, the Planning Commission recommended approval for the 10 most southern acres of the proposed project site. The project proponent has requested that the entire 19.55 acre site be redesignated for high density development instead of only the southern 10 acres. That original recommendation by staff to reduce the overall acreage to 10 acres was based on a concern that the state may not consider all of the 20 acres viable for high density development. However, the property owner believes that only redesignating a portion of the site will actually create more difficulty in overall development. I would also note that staff did receive correspondence today, verbal correspondence, that the project applicant is now requesting that the northern 10 acres be zoned at the R2 level instead of R3 level, which I believe they will be providing during public comments to your board today. So again, the final Planning Commission recommendation before your board can be found on page 26 of your staff report. Staff is prepared to answer any questions your board may have on a site-by-site basis, including providing specific recommendations for approval of the sites being recommended for denial by the Planning Commission, as staff believes those sites should be wholly or partially redesignated for high-density development in some form, should your board desire that. So unless Ms. Oviatt has any additional comments, that completes staff's presentation. And again, I would request that during the public testimony portion, speakers not only provide their name for the record, but they identify which project they are here to speak on. Again, those numbers can be found on the far left column of those blue handout sheets that have been made available today. That completes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Ms. Oviatt, do you have any additional comments? You don't? Okay, very good. I'm going to ask if the board has any questions before I start opening up the public comments. Okay, I don't see any. Just want to just establish a couple of procedural items for all of you who have attended. I know many of you probably attended the Planning Commission. Our meetings are conducted a little bit differently than theirs. For our meetings, you'll come up to the podium and state your name and your comments. You have 2 minutes for your comments, and so at the conclusion of the 2 minutes, if you're still talking, I'll let you know that your time has expired and ask you to bring your comments to a close. And you will only get one opportunity to come up to the microphone and speak unless a board member has a question of you, and then they can request that you come back up to the microphone. But otherwise, it's one bite of the apple, so to speak. And so we appreciate your cooperation on that. And so at this time, I'll remind everyone, if they haven't picked up the blue forms, I believe those are located at the tables in the back. If you're having trouble locating one, you can raise your hand, and I'm sure staff at either one of these two corners can help you. But if you're ready to speak and you have your blue sheet, please come forward, and we welcome your comments.
My name's Stephen Ponning. I'm going to read this to you. It'll go a little faster. Housing element. Oh, I'm sorry, Mojave Project 3. It's the Barstow Road one. AB 215-1, the first draft revision of a housing element must be available for public comment for at least 30 days. I don't think that was done. I could be wrong. Item 4 on your mail out shows you are trying to provide housing for all income ranges, yet you only list low income residents by 30% and 5% for extremely poor for this particular project. So in keeping with the laws and the codes, you can't force a project to push forward if it is not in line with the existing surroundings. That's why it was zoned 10 residents per acre to begin with. To my understanding, there are 8 elements that you are required to consider before any project can begin. Land use. It is not the best use of land for this particular area. Transportation. Traffic is bad already in that small cul-de-sac. Roads are destroyed because an inferior company was used to pave the existing roads to save money, yet our vehicle repairs are endless. Conservation. Where is the drought water coming from? And there's no room for floral habitat on this particular project. Noise. 29 units increase noise factors to existing residents. That's not good. Open space. Where would you park the 56 cars that go with those 29 apartments? Underground? Safety. Crime is at an all-time high and only gets worse. This does not improve for existing homeowners and renters. You are burdening them more. Environmental justice. Dilapidated buildings and crime is rampant. How is adding 29 more units in 1 acre going to improve the plight of existing tax-paying homeowners? Where is the justice in that?
Mr. Potting, that's 2 minutes for you. Your time has expired. Please bring your comments to a close.
Is my wife allowed to speak? And
if she'd like to come up, she'll get 2 minutes.
Can she give me her time?
She can. No, she will have to be doing the speaking.
Right.
Thank you.
Right here.
Thank you. Appreciate your cooperation.
Okay.
My name is Margaret Ponning. It's about Mojave Project 3. The discussion is about housing. How does 29 units, 1,501 square feet, apartments fit into a 1 acre? 10 is hard pressed, so now you have an eyesore that does not match the existing structures. Sirs, if you would just canvass the people door to door, you would know their wishes. Holding a meeting at an appropriate time for working taxpayers once a month or 3 months does not address any real problems. Having this meeting at 2 o'clock so working people cannot attend is hard and wrong, and you know it. Create a special meeting. You are the elected supervisors. Here is 70+ people out of the 72 we talked to that do not want this zone change. They do not want this zone change. They do not. It makes me wonder as well as want to work to get someone who will listen for them. My husband and I are 74 years old. He's a Vietnam vet who is trying to help arrange a double funeral for our oldest friend and wife. We are dealing with our daughter and son in Tampa, Florida, being ruined by Hurricane Ida. And if I can make time with no money to gather these people's wishes of no zone change, you should listen to them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Who'll be next, please?
My name is Lucy Shears. Thank you for this opportunity to address you all today. I am addressing project item 37 on the list. I am here to voice my concerns regarding the zone change requested by the Kern County Planning and Natural Resources Department. I grew up in this neighborhood and I own property here. I did collect those 50-some signatures. I walked through my street, Larkus Avenue, Lucky Avenue, Potomac Avenue, and part of Victoria in order to collect those signatures. I didn't know that they needed addresses. The area is becoming seriously impoverished as I hear through the public comments, the road conditions, and I understand that that's probably something the city is dealing with as a whole. But I need to mention that we already have a large recycling area on Edison Highway that's really near this area. The Bakersfield Rescue Mission and another one on Brundage. These kinds of environments are really impacting our neighborhood. The Mount Vernon overpass lights have not been working for 2 years, and I was told from people who are near there that it was the homeless people that pulled the wires out of there, and that's why it's not working. And so that's a very big concern for the neighborhood. Children passing, I understand Mike Maggard helped facilitate a blinking light on East California for the students who go to Bethel Christian School there, and it is helping, but I think they need additional. A lot of the lightings in the area need to be redone.
Ms. Shears, your time has expired.
Okay.
Please bring your comments to a close.
We think that the additional zone change would cause additional problems on the resources there. Besides the schools, even if you input money to them, the
Thank you,
campus
ma'am.
is not big enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Could I have the pictures for the presentation? Hi, I'm Wayne Rankin. I live at 8101 Rosewood. I have 4 properties on Rosewood, 2 that border the southern project.
Mr. Rankin,
map 20.
which site? Map 20?
It's number 20 on the agenda.
Thank you.
This is my front yard right here. Of course, we've all seen this before, but this is a natural occurrence in my neighborhood. Can I have the next one, please? This is my fence on a sideways angle, but those posts used to all be in a row when I first put them up. Every pole's been hit in my yard, so I had to replace everything with oil-filled pipe that's 7 foot long and spaced out at 8-foot intervals. Next one, please. This is a young man in a Mercedes-Benz that ran through my front yard. The fire department pulled him out of the fence, and he actually lived. Next photo, please. There's another car that ended up in my front yard at a different incident, hitting my fence again. Next photo, please. There's a pile of 40 railroad ties in my front yard that I had to put there because that lane right there that they use ends up in my front bedroom. I've had 3 cars in my front yard, 2 that made it to the flower bed, 1 that made it into my bedroom. So I bought 40 railroad ties and put up in my front yard on the path that they all use. And if you look behind it, that's my granddaughter's swing. And you'll see that our chairs, that's the only place it's safe to sit in my front yard. Next photo, please. There's my granddaughter in her swing. The only safe place to play in the front yard is behind those 40 railroad ties. They're not there for decoration. They're there for safety. Next photo, please. Even my dogs know to hide behind the railroad ties in my front yard. That is the only place in my front yard. You look at the poles on the street right now. See how they're all leaning to the east? That's because they've all been hit more than one time. Now, you're going to put 500 units at the end of this street, and there's only 2 streets that go into this neighborhood, with Rosewood and Shalane. Neither one of them have crosswalks. Neither one of them have stop signs. Well, there's a stop sign at Shalane, but no crosswalks. Okay, next photo, please. And this is the granddaughter that I do everything in my life to protect, including buying $400 worth of railroad ties to stack in my front yard.
Mr. Rankin, thank you. Your time has expired.
Okay, I'm just asking you, please don't put this project through. The traffic we have is so unreal right now. The highway patrol says my yard's been hit more than any yard that they have in Kern County. The traffic's the biggest issue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
My name is Stephen Myrick. I'm on 36 here, Mike's district, I'm just gonna be brief. When the Belcourt Apartments went in beside me, I fought a drainage problem, tried code compliance and everything to get out the house. That entire 5 acres drains to my lot. to my block wall and went around the corner where the apartment complex was. And I fought and I got them to put a little canal in and a furrow from the oil company to direct the water, but it still floods. I had to put in a pump system to get, for the winter time. And we've been going through a drought. I want to make sure that this lot drains to the street. I mean, it's 3 or 4 feet higher out at the street than where it is where my block wall is. And I'll be short, and I just want to make sure that we look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Michael Spickler. I've lived in Rosedale for 30 years. Last 14 years, I've been on the Rosedale School Board. My wife and I both live and work in Rosedale. I'm here today to support project number 32 at the corner of Hageman and Nord. Project 32 will provide much-needed multifamily residential units. 2 of my grown children both looked for affordable housing in Rosedale, and this is not to be found out there. This is a much-needed project. It's located at the corner of 2 major arterials. No immediate neighbors will be affected. There's walking distance to a future school sites, future park site. They're not going to build the parks and the schools until we get the people out there. So please join me in supporting project number 32. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Thank you.
Michael McCain. We're looking at number 26. I don't know if you guys know. I heard it's already recommended that it be denied anyway, but figured it wouldn't hurt if I talked. I'm already here. First of all, Verdugo is like one lane each way. There's no growth room because the house is already there. So there's no turn lane. Traffic would be horrible. If traffic was forced out, then they'd be going in front of my house. And all the neighbors I talked to on Shellabarger, none of us want this to go through. And of course, there's always all the usual, we're concerned about property values, more people walking our street, going through our cars. And so just everybody on Shellabarger anyway definitely does not want to see this happen. And once again, I heard him say that they're recommending that it not pass. And we're definitely opposed, so please take that into account when you all are talking about it later. And I guess that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, please.
Hello, my name is Mark Payette, and I'm on item number 33, which has already been recommended to not be included. I am here to support that decision. Please exclude this item, Mr. Peters. This area does not meet many of the criteria that was outlined by your staff, in particular, access to groceries, schools, sewers. Changes to roadways here would be significant. We're talking about Rosedale Avenue, west of Heath, and also Wegas Avenue, north of Rosedale. Changing those roads would be a significant undertaking, much more so than many of the other projects listed here. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the new refinery here in town and on Rosedale Boulevard, a longtime Rosedale resident. I think it would be a big mistake to put a project like this so far away from any support services. It really is in the middle of nowhere. So I just urge you to make the right decision and follow the advice of your staff and remove item number 33 from the listing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Again, Cynthia Callaway, item 20. Again, I brought in over 100 signatures to opposing the R change, and also the signatures that I talked to, they all would love to see a park on these 4 lots, a green zone, which we discussed. And everybody's opposed to this R3 change. So I think, 100+ signatures. I don't know if it's got any clout. I mean, I own a home in the East Wind Estates, and my property overlooks the valley. And plus the property, our property streets are approximately 20 feet above these 4 lots. I mean, there's a block wall that's, I'd say, at least 20, 30 feet high on the backside. It's a drop off from the houses that are butted up against it. They're gonna be looking over into this. All these the houses that are along there, I think there's about 10 in that housing tract that'll be looking over into these. So you're gonna have trash. It is what it is. I think a park would be better suitable for that area, being that most of these houses are new, that's been built in here. Some of these people that bought homes in here were promised a park in the area, and there still hasn't been one built. So that's all I have to say. I'm opposed of it.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Linda Gregory, regarding item number 32. And Supervisor Peters, I did send probably at least 2 letters to your office and called your office. And I represent the Nord Road Water Association where I live. We, unlike one person that is in favor of it, we live right by it. Our Nord Road Water Association is directly next to the high-density proposed site. So it does affect us very greatly. So we're in opposition of the zone change. We obtain our residential water from private groundwater. And so we have a well that supports our association, the 16 houses. The high-impact, high-density development will likely bring 750 to 1,000 new residents to this area, and as you can imagine, placing an increase of 1,000 more residents into this small rural agricultural area begs to question the related to water quality, water availability, agriculture areas, traffic pollution, air pollution, noise pollution, environmental impact, open space, public services. It does not complement the area. We are an agriculture area. We have a minimum of 2.5 acres in our association. The proposed site is estate residential, which could complement it. High density would not complement the area, especially agriculture that we have. There's many people that have cows, horses. I could see complaints in the future for that, of them complaining about the agriculture. So it's not compatible, it's incompatible. It does not meet the criteria that the planning department says, and the Planning Commission has denied it. We're really asking you to remove item number 32 from the zone change completely.
Thank you, Mrs. Greger. Your time has expired.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Justin Ming. I am the adjacent homeowner and landowner to Project 32. I just want to publicly give my full support. The Beatty project has always been first class, always top notch. I have an existing development just to the east of my property. And I've grown up in Roselle my whole life. I'm CEO of Vinergy Incorporated here in town. It's hard for my employees to find places to live, and that's affordable. They always have to come from the other side of town. I'm in full support of this. Project 32, thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Jay Crossland. I am here
regarding case number 35. It has been, the planning board had recommended not changing the zoning. I live on Westdale Drive, which is one of 14 or 15 properties that back up to that, because that property is about a quarter of a mile long. We are zoned E 1/2, and it would affect our property values. We already have had people that have bought recently said they would not have bought there if they'd have known that. I would not have built there when I built there. Also, traffic on Westdale is heavy due to Centennial Elementary School being located down Westdale Boulevard Drive, and we face that street. And with the 290 apartment units there, that would increase traffic to unsafe levels. We also face the additional risk of children when walking, trying to shortcut through our properties on their way to school. We have had problems with the trailer park, which is loaded just north of there and west, trying to cut through the properties, and the crime associated with the helicopters going over constantly over that area, so that wouldn't help. And then, so the traffic on Westdale Drive, because that's the closest route, would be increased greatly. Also, Jenkins itself, if there's, per his figures, with 7 trips per day, there would be over 2,000 trips out of that neighborhood going onto a 2-lane Jenkins Road that they'd have to figure out a way to move houses on the other side of the street to widen it to where the right-of-way is for the rest of it. So I would urge the board to please go with the Planning Commission and deny the rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I forgot to mention before what going on in my Barstow Road, Mojave Garden. We
Which
have
item are
two
you speaking on,
kinds.
sir?
Okay,
Which number are you speaking on?
Miku Finkelstein, my name.
Are you talking about item 3 on here?
Yeah,
Item
item
3?
three.
Okay, thank you.
Item 3.
And what's your name?
Finkelstein.
Thank you. Got it.
I forgot to mention, we all have in Barstow Road 2 numbers. One is from Barstow Road, and one is for Highway 58, which is legal. The Highway 58 number is 17, my house 1788. The Barstow Road is 1780. It's 2 numbers. I forgot to mention this. Divided by a fence, by the chain link fence, divided the road, Barstow Road, and the Highway 58. I live exactly before the courthouse, in Pink House. However, the point what I want to make is we have 2 kind of numbers over there. So the point is it's very, that time when they built on 53, what I heard, I live over there only for 20 years. No, I don't know what happened before. But however, people told me they have eminent domain. They took the property away from all the street around. They put their Barstow Road over there, up to the property where it's supposed to you to build up there, this property. This is why I ask you why you don't have all the street R3 already. R3. It makes sense to me, because it's part of the 58. Actually, when I took the permit to build something over there to exchange the garage and a room, they told me to put the number, no Barstow Road number.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
The number from 58.
Thank you, Mr.
The
Finkelstein.
legal one, because all the emergency
your
stuff.
time has expired.
Know the number.
Very good. Your time has expired. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Joe Stevenson. I'm in regards to number 2 on the list in opposition. It meets none of the criteria that he listed off earlier. The location is in a flood zone. It's over 6 miles away from any services. Fire department, police department, water, sewer, gas, nothing. There's not a grocery store within 6.5 miles of the location. And the roadway there could not possibly handle the increase in traffic that 150 plus units would add to Sierra Highway, which is only 2 lanes, and to Bacchus Road, which is access to the freeway at that point, which again, very small 2-lane road, would not handle the increase in traffic. And everybody there bought in this area because they wanted a small, tight area. They don't want apartment buildings. I didn't move out here to move in next to apartment buildings. I moved out here to get away from them. And they have nothing that they need to meet it. They're going to have to run water and sewer, or they're going to put an unprecedented load on our well system because we're on our own wells. I'm on propane. There is no gas out there. The police department, when I've had to call them out, it took over 30 minutes to get there because they're 7 miles away. And they have to get out there. And this area does not meet any of the criteria he listed off as being required for one of these developments. And that's all I have to say about it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And in your area.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Pelz, Executive Director of the Housing Authority, County of Kern. I'm actually commenting on all of the proposed land use designation changes. I want to commend the Planning and Natural Resources Department for proposing these needed changes. Over the past 20 years, housing costs have risen at a much faster pace than income in Kern County, creating an affordability crisis. In the past 2 years, we've experienced a historically tight rental market with unprecedented increases in rents and housing prices. These impact thousands of seniors, disabled veterans, and others on fixed incomes, as well as individuals working entry-level jobs. They're having to choose between paying their rent or paying for food and medical bills. As you consider the proposed land use changes, I ask you would consider and remember the following. First, rapid increases in rental and housing costs are primarily due to insufficient supply. The best way to increase supply is to facilitate development by increasing the amount of land that's zoned for housing, in particular higher density residential. Second, a 2020 nationwide GAO study found a strong correlation between increases in rent costs and the rate of homelessness in communities. Reducing rental costs will address an underlying cause of homelessness in Kern County. Third, the properties recommended for rezoning can be developed with condos, market rate apartments, or affordable homes. All will be an improvement over dusty vacant lots that have sat many years undeveloped. And finally, if we fail to make bold changes, we should expect housing affordability to continue to decline and homelessness to continue to increase in our community. I do encourage you to accept the original staff recommendations and approve all of the properties, including those that the Planning Commission rejected. The properties recommended for denial have 2 things in common. One is they are all in the greater Bakersfield area, which actually has the highest need for additional multifamily zone properties. And they all happen to be, in my belief, in moderate or higher income areas. Kern County desperately needs the additional acres and potential units that these rejected properties could provide. Thank you for your support as we work together to make Kern County a place where all residents can pursue their dreams and live in homes that are safe and affordable. Thank you.
Thank you. Who'll be next, please?
Are you folks able to pull up item number 2 on the board, please? My name is Stephen Harvey. I'm from Mojave, California. I recently purchased property in January 19. This item in question involves 2 vacant, abandoned houses that are in severe disarray. This property owner approached me when I first purchased. I am literally, you see that dirt road right above the CC? That is my place. That's correct. And if you follow it on up, that is a private road, not a county road. I'm approximately 500 feet from this location. This property owner has told me he was going to revamp these properties himself and had not. I am considerably concerned about the possibility, if you look at that yellow line, how they're going to put, you said, a minimum of 16 to 20 units minimum in there, plus parking. That's Sierra Highway. If you would have followed up about another mile north, you get to the end of Sierra Highway, where Silver Clean Road is. I'm not opposed to these low-budget housing, by the way. I believe this is the wrong area. Just a few miles south, I had looked at purchasing a property before I bought this, and they told me, no, that's in the works for low-budget apartments. But in the 3 years I've been there, nothing has happened on that property. I'm imploring you not to build or allow this to happen. Around me are all people 55 and older. In fact, some of my neighbors that I'm representing are in their 70s and 80s. The man that just spoke, Joe, is one of my neighbors. This is on well. There's not enough, I don't know how they could dig a big enough well to be able to support that many people in that place. I'm not against low housing, but in Mojave or Rosamond, somewhere closer where these facilities are available, as he says, we are 7 miles away from the nearest grocery store, police, ambulance, and I'm highly asking you to deny the approval of this property. This man has abandoned these properties. They're wide open, and you're my supervisor. If this was anywhere in a city, it would be demanded to be boarded up. None of these houses are boarded up.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Mr. Harvey, your time's expired. I do want to ask you for a favor, though. Could you leave your contact information with Mr. Alsop right there?
I will.
I did get some preliminary information on Rosamond Boulevard, the paving schedule for that, and so I'd like to share that with you in addition to touch base with you on the other item that you brought up. I believe it was Lone Pine. And so if you could leave your information, I'd like to get back
This
to
is
you.
a vacant lot that's been like this since I bought my property.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Roberto Padilla, and I'm here for case number 19 that has been recommended by the Kern County Planning and Resources Department for denial. And I'd like to reiterate what they have decided and also suggest that you deny that. Actually, when we left the Kern Planning Committee and Resources meeting, I was very satisfied that they heard our concerns, and especially Ashley Skidmore and Judge, Planning Committee member Judge, really reiterated our emphasis on the surrounding community and understood that. So I think in their wisdom, they were correct in that. So I would like to reiterate that I'm here for our community on number 19, also suggesting denial. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Anna Lavin, and I'm the Executive Director for the Bakersfield Kern Regional Homeless Collaborative. And I am here to speak on behalf of all of the proposed projects coming from the department. It's not a surprise to you. I know you've already heard Mr. Peltz's comments, and I would reiterate those. We are essentially in a housing crisis in our community. In order for us to be able to be more successful with addressing homelessness, we must have additional housing opportunities across the full spectrum of housing need for all of Kern County. What's been happening for us as we've been attempting to address homelessness and get those who have experienced homelessness into housing opportunities with the existing market conditions that we have, they are now having to compete against a whole host of folks that they haven't had to compete against before for that housing unit. What's happened is entry-level professionals, our elderly, veterans, and a whole host of other folks who may have already been able or previously been able to access higher levels or more expensive housing, because we have market conditions where we have a less than 2% availability, What that means is they are now getting squeezed down. And when they get squeezed down, that means that they are now competing for the more affordable types of units, if that makes sense. So the challenge here is that if we want to address homelessness and we want to prevent additional homelessness from taking place, we have to increase our housing stock across all the different varieties of housing that are available in Kern. And if that doesn't happen, then we will continue to see a squeeze on those who are experiencing homelessness. Both M Street Navigation Center as the Brundage Lane Navigation Center will continue to see folks who are matched to vouchers be unable to find housing opportunities. It means that those folks will not move into permanent housing and be stabilized and successful. What that also means is that then we're able to move fewer and fewer people off the streets. So it creates a domino effect when we don't have enough housing in the community. So I'm speaking on behalf of all of these opportunities to have multifamily units. For every space that you end up deciding to deny, recall that that's one more
Thank you, Ms. Lehman.
unit for which we have to compete.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
My name's Rhonda Ellis, and I'm for number 35. I live on Jenkins Road, where it will affect me. I am opposing it, and I urge the board to oppose it. We do have traffic that has increased tenfold in the 4 years that we've been there, and I find that it will be a lot worse if you go ahead and do all this. There is a lot of accidents down our end of Jenkins Road and Rosedale, so I am obviously against putting in any more housing there to exasperate it as such. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sandra Plasencia, Leadership Council. I'm commenting on 19, 20, 26, 32, 33, and 35. We are here to request that the Board of Supervisors rezone all of the sites selected by planning staff as part of the county's rezoning process and reject the Planning Commission's recommendation to eliminate the following proposed R3 sites: 19, 20, 26, 32, 33, and 35. Eliminating the proposed rezoning sites in higher resource areas will violate the county's duty to affirmatively further fair housing. Eliminating the proposed rezoning sites would also result and rezoning that is under the acreage required by programs 222 and 223. If adopted by the board, the commission's recommendations by the June 23rd public hearing would violate the county's AFFH obligations. Rezoning for high-density housing in predominantly low-resource areas and removing sites in areas with greater economic opportunity goes against the county's AFFH obligations. Such actions will not only fail to address significant disparities in housing needs and in access to opportunity, but further contribute to pre-existing housing inequities and patterns of segregation. Moreover, the public comments advocating for the county to remove parcels raised concerns that the Planning Commission made rezoning decisions based on stereotypes and biases. In addition, approving sites in lower income areas and areas of high poverty and segregation and removing the sites from consideration in higher resource and disproportionately white areas would violate FIHA by perpetuating and reinforcing segregation. In the county's next planning period, state law will require the county to demonstrate that its inventory of sites accommodating the RHNA affirmatively furthers fair housing. Rezoning sites throughout the county now, including in higher resource areas, will improve the county's position for the 6-cycle housing element requirement. We request that the Board of Supervisors rezone adequate sites to comply with state housing element law and to include the sites the Planning Commission removed due to the pressure and prejudice from the public. Refusing to do so will violate the county's duty to affirmatively further fair housing, violate state anti-discrimination laws, and put the county at a severe disadvantage for complying with new housing element requirements that will apply to its 6th housing element. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Scrivener and members of the board. My name is Joey O'Connell. Myself, the Beatties, and a number of members of our community are here to speak in support of project number 32. I first want to thank you for your consideration of this project. We think we have a great project that will provide much needed service to the Northwest Bakersfield, and I want to take just a minute to outline why. First, we met with most of the immediate neighbors to the proposed project, and as a result, reduced the scope of the project from 25 acres to 10 acres. In turn, most of the neighbors no longer stand opposed to our project. Second, there are schools being built right across the street. Third, there's water, sewer, will serve letters all in place for this project already. There is a park scheduled to be built just to the south of this project. It's 10 acres and will serve as a buffer of 600 feet between our southern end of the apartments and the nearest neighbor. So there's a significant gap between us and the closest neighbor. And lastly, I want to point out that this project is being led by a local team. The Beatties, whose reputation for producing wonderful projects throughout the community is well known. And I'm a local resident. I've lived in Northwest Bakersfield since 1984. I live just a stone's throw from this project on Heath Road and have since 1995. We're involved in this. We're here to make sure that this project turns out very nice, and we're members of this community. So we ask that you motion to approve project number 32 and help us provide for a much-needed service to Northwest Bakersfield, as this project meets all the standards of the state. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Yes, my name's Betty Stevenson, and I'm here about number 2. It's a terrible place to build that multi-unit. It's directly across from a railroad track. We're in the Edwards flight pattern and very close to the mine, so we get a lot of blasts. The house shakes. Silver Queen Mine is a wonderful place. It's just loud. And they're going to feel it. And I had a drawing of the, that was taken off the flood control area, which show you it's definitely in a flood control. If you look there, that's the big blue parts on the other side of the 14, and that goes all the way down past the railroad tracks, exactly where that is. I know, because I live just behind that. 2 roads, if you count our little dirt roads. It's just not the best thing for them to consider. I mean, we're so far out there that the election board, when they send us our papers to vote, tell us to vote by mail. Don't give us a voting poll, because we're too far out. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Who'll be next, please?
Good afternoon, Chairman Scrivener and honorable board members. I'm here to speak about case 20. I want to start by commending the planning staff. I have a copy of the staff report.
May we have your name, please, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeff Gutierrez. And I'm one of the property owners. There's actually 4 parcels. I own the southerly parcel, but we're number 20 there. I thought it important, after looking at the staff report, that I address the comments that were made by the people who are opposed to this. And so they basically end up in 3 categories: crime, traffic, and property values were the things that they brought up. On pages 320, 321, 322, and 323 of the staff report, the people who commented submitted crime reports about the area, and they're significant. There's 4 pages of crime that have happened recently in this area, and there's no multifamily housing there. So I don't know that that necessarily supports their argument that multifamily housing is going to cause crime. There's already crime in the area, and in fact, I've been a victim of that crime. I've fenced my property twice. None of the fencing material is there at this point in time, not even the fence posts. I've posted no trespassing signs. They're gone. So there's already crime that is happening in this area without any multifamily there. Traffic, if you notice, Monica Street, which goes north and south and is on the east end of 3 of the parcels, and Shailene Avenue, they are both 90-foot wide right-of-ways. They are collectors at this point. So these 4 parcels are kind of set up to handle traffic as it is right now. Property values, there are, staff report again was very well done. There are 2 studies in the staff report that were done on pages 39 and 42 by separate entities, one of which said that affordable housing didn't necessarily cause depression or even suppression of property values, and the other study said that there were slight increases in property values around affordable housing projects. So the last thing that I wanted to point out was that I looked at the petition that was submitted and the streets that those petitioners were from. The majority of them are from mobile home parks that are north of this property, and their density is similar to the R3 density that we're proposing, or that the county is proposing. So I just found it ironic that they were complaining about higher density in their neighborhood. So that's all I've got, so thank you.
Next speaker, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Todd Wood. I'm with DeWalt Corporation, and I'm here today to speak regarding case 21. And I have an exhibit, if I could, share with the board and have put up on the screen. So today I'm here representing property owners Michael Bradford, who's here in attendance, his brother Peter Bradford, and sister Linda Patton. They've been owners of this property since, my gosh, I believe they said 73 years. So they're longtime residents of Bakersfield, grew up in Bakersfield, and have contributed to this community for many, many decades. On August 24th, they did receive an email notifying them by county staff that staff's going to recommend upzoning the property on just the southern half of the parcel. The 10 acres that you see there designated as R3. The remaining 9.5 acres that was going to be proposed was going to be remaining at estate half acre. So you'd have R3 with the higher density adjacent to half acre estate. Mr. Peter Bradford on September 13th provided a letter to the planning department requesting that the entire parcel be zoned consistently R3 so that you don't have an inconsistent zoning of R3 next to the estate half acre. Since that time, Mr. Bradford has consulted with our office, also has consulted with other real estate professionals, and they've come to the conclusion that the entire property of 19.5 acres being zoned R3 wouldn't be necessarily consistent with zoning and easily developable. So what they'd like to do is modify their request based on the figure that I've provided here today to go ahead and continue with staff's recommendation of the R3 on the southerly 10 acres, but they would like to request to do R2 zoning on the remaining 9.5 acres. So this provides, we believe, consistency with the parcel between the mixed zoning, meets the objectives of providing more affordable housing, and also meets the objectives of flexibility for future development. So we appreciate your consideration, and we are available in the future if you need to answer questions. I'm here for your answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. I'm Dave Domalowski, representing the Home Builders Association of Kern County. Not speaking in regard to any specific site, but we certainly support the process that your staff has brought forward to the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors. I just wanted to elaborate on some of the aspects of our housing crisis that have been mentioned earlier. In terms of construction costs, in the last 10 years, the cost of constructing a typical 1,600 square foot single family home has gone up by over $65,000. Roughly $30,000 of that is attributable to energy efficiency code improvements or code updates alone. So that's one of the drivers of the crisis. And that puts added emphasis on the need for additional multifamily housing. The governor has weaponized the Department of Housing and Community Development against cities and counties who they don't believe are keeping pace with their housing production goals. We think the state is serious about that, and we would encourage you to approve as many of the sites on your agenda today as possible, but keep looking if you're still short of the state requirements. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, sir. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Nico Garza. I'm with DeWalt Corporation, and I'll be representing our client on item number 20. Currently, our project is on deny, and we'd like to go ahead and request that it be approved. Our project is located on Brimhall and Verdugo. It's consistent with neighboring properties. There is a higher density towards the west. On the screen, I do have an exhibit with the location and the project. Our client is aware of the improvements that will be needed, so we will be enlarging Verdugo. Also including with infrastructure, we do know that there is a sewer line running along Verdugo, and we will be improving those. Also with the improvements would be a signal. I know south from there is elementary school, American. That will aid in child safety. With the signal improvements, we can go ahead and add crosswalks. There will be lights. There'll be improvements in the area. I'd like to ask the board today if they can go ahead and approve item number 20 and reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and Board. My name is Linda Irby. I'm speaking concerning item number 33. I was heavily involved in this. As far as the staff report, you'll see that I had over 300 plus signatures concerning the site for disapproval. The Planning Commission ruled that it was not to be approved due to we're still a semi-rural area. We don't have the sidewalks, we don't have the roads, so they disapproved it. So I would like your consideration to continue with the Planning Commission's non-approval for the site. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors and staff. My name is Brian Beatty, and I'm speaking today on behalf of project number 32. The Beatty family has invested more than 40 years in building quality homes and neighborhoods that have made Rosedale a better place to live. The application before the board, identified as Project 32, has a unique opportunity to be a small step forward to making up for the serious lack of housing options in Western Rosedale. We strongly encourage you to support this project. Throughout my building career, I've never built an apartment in Western Rosedale. In fact, I'm not aware of a single new apartment complex that has been built in an unincorporated area of Northwest Bakersfield in over 30 years. From a pure planning perspective, we believe that our application that's before you this afternoon meets every requirement. We have a close proximity to future parks and schools. These are sites actually owned by NOR Park District and the Rosedale School District. We have will serve letters from the water provider and the sewer provider. We address the lack of housing options in Western Rosedale, which have been previously described to you. Our location is at the intersection of two major arterial roads. They'd be the equivalent of Stockdale Highway and Gosford Road in size. We have close and financially feasible access to live, active sewer. And the Vaughan Water Company has just completed a major water treatment and pumping plant immediately adjacent to our site. Additionally, our overall traffic impacts will be mitigated by current development and building standards and project fees that are collected by your County of Kern. For example, the addition of the project-specific requirements will be widening Hageman and Nord Road within our project boundaries. In addition, our project will contribute more than $1 million towards overall Rosedale traffic improvements. That being said, after meeting with our neighbors who live on Pacini and Nord and listening to their concerns, we've asked county staff to revise its original application, which was 25 acres and 700 buildable units, down to 210 buildable multifamily units on 10 acres. And then wrap this apartment complex with 15 acres of single-family homes, which would provide an additional buffer for our neighbors. It should be noted that our closest neighbor is over 660 feet away from this project. On the single-family portion of our project, we're dedicated to continuing to use a variety of floor plans and architectural styles with our long-term team of local home builders. Names that you recognize, such as Mike Soper Homes, Brian Rice Construction, George Delfino, Ron Froelich, and many others. The Beatty family has shown that our approach to building and developing adds lasting value to our new projects as well as our neighbors. I'd like my son, Justin, to say a few words now.
Justin Beatty, good afternoon, supervisors. In designing this project, it was very important to us that we maintain the charm and character that is Western Rosedale. I was born and raised in Rosedale and attended local schools. My mom was born 1 mile from the site and lived there her whole life. To this end, we hired Aris architects to study our project site and prepare a conceptual design that would fit in with the area. After careful consideration, Magnolia Square was created. Magnolia Square will be a 210-unit apartment community consisting of 2-story buildings, each offering 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units behind the privacy of gates with on-site management, a swimming pool, clubhouse, and fitness center. As I said previously, my family and I were born and raised in Bakersfield and plan to continue to do so for many generations to come. For this reason, we are committed to incorporating design elements into our project that will improve the environment and quality of life for residents in Bakersfield. Marquee design elements will include high-efficiency air conditioning, heating, lighting, low water usage landscaping, high-efficiency building design, solar panels, and electric vehicle charging stations for residents. In summary, the Beatty and O'Connell families support staff's initial application presented to Planning Commission on June 23rd, and we would ask that the board vote yes on Project 32 and approving the specific plan amendment and zone change for 10 acres of high-density residential with a buffer of 15 acres of single-family residential. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I misspoke earlier. I just want to clarify it's for project number 26.
Yeah, we got that.
Okay,
I think most of us made that correction on for you. Thanks. Next, please.
Good afternoon, honorable supervisors. I'm Whitney Jackson with McIntosh & Associates, representing the applicant and owner in item 4, case 33. As you know, the planning commissioners voted to deny our upzone proposal of the site for R3 due to neighboring concerns. We have listened to and addressed these concerns. We come to your board with a revised request approving the proposal site for LMR R2. Our site consists of 40 acres located at the northeast corner of Wegas Avenue and Rosedale Highway. There's a non-buildable easement with PG&E power poles running east and west along the north 7 acres of the project site. We're proposing a 7-acre park to be dedicated to NOR for the entire community to enjoy. This can include a dog park, pedestrian pathways, and beautiful landscaping. We're proposing about 8 acres of market rate duplexes that will be owned by the applicant, maintained by an HOA, with large lot, single family dwelling units for the remainder of the site, wrapping those duplexes. The duplexes will be private and gated with amenities such as a clubhouse, fitness center, swimming pool, and rec areas. The proposed architecture of the site is traditional, modern, and sleek. The proposed meets every single general and land use plan goal outlined in the Western Rosedale specific plan, namely minimizing scattered urban sprawl, which is a major problem in Rosedale, and enhancing the character by improving infrastructure. The project will make major infrastructure improvements with widening Rosedale Highway and connecting the multi-use trails along Wegas Avenue. Our project sites an infill lot with residential housing tracts to the north and sprawling residential and ag uses to the east, south, and west. The site will enhance the visual appearance of the existing environment. The development will also facilitate needed funding for the local school district. It will truly bring added value to the area through thoughtful design and execution. Thank you for your time, and please let me know if you have any additional questions.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors, staff. My name is Jeff Young. I'm the developer and property owner, along with my family and partners, of case number 33. I live just over a half a mile from the subject property. So I've received all of the next door neighbor app notifications and the petitions and everything that went around with what we feel was started with misinformation, and we feel that our project was pulled from the housing element based off of some of the misinformation that was attached to our project. This is a legacy project for us. We've been in the area for over 5 generations. Wegas Avenue is named after my great-grandfather. This is something we want to be a nice project. Like Whitney just said, this is going to be a gated community, a single story, matching the architecture of the area, and something that we feel like we want to be proud of, and I wouldn't mind living next to, because I do. Like I said, I bought my lot. I designed my house. I permitted and built my house, and I've lived in it for over 6 months, all in the time that we've been trying to get a zone change on this property. So again, I just want to reiterate our ask is to re-include us in the housing element and to downzone us to an R2 for the complete project. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
We're available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Next speaker, please. Okay, I'm not seeing any others. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for your comments. Now I'm going to first return to staff to see if they have any comments regarding anything that was stated by the speakers or anything else. Ms. Oviatt, please.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy will just clarify some of the zoning on these properties, and then I'll wrap it up.
So just to respond to some of the comments that were made, first, again, your commission is not your board is not considering the original adoption of the housing element, which did require a 30-day circulation, everything along those lines. We are looking to amend various land use designations to implement a program in the housing element. So you are actually not taking any action specifically related to the housing element from that perspective. Secondly, I would just note part of the reasons, and this applies to Site 2 and Site 3, so the existing general plan designation for the Mojave specific plan already has those sites designated for high density development. So part of the reason we brought those forward was because the existing zoning is not consistent with the underlying adopted general plan that has those specified for high density development. Regarding site number 37, we did acknowledge and receive that comment letter. It is 2 parcels totaling approximately 7 acres. Again, while I am not a developer, 7 acres at a single family level with the requirements for the infrastructure improvements and cost, that can be difficult. And so staff does believe that potential higher density development within that area would allow for some of that development to occur, which could address some of the concerns that were raised by the commenter. You had a comment regarding flooding. I would just note that any project, when a building permit is submitted, does go through a floodplain review, and all of that site has to address the existing on-site flooding. So any development would actually help any flooding issues within an area as opposed to hinder it anymore. Regarding site number 33, there was a comment made about the existing roads is not sufficient for the overall potential traffic that would be generated. I would just note, I think that's a general theme that we've heard a lot, is that people are looking at the existing roadway and not looking at it in terms of thinking when project is developed, that roadway gets expanded to its ultimate right-of-way. So yes, I would agree that an existing 2-lane road is not sufficient. However, development will expand it, and ultimately the roadway that's there now is not what staff has identified or what the general plan has identified in terms of the ultimate build out of that roadway. So again, that's just an overall theme, is when people look at potential concerns, they're looking at what's there now and not looking at what the entire roadway capacity needs to be built out to and that is already identified as part of our planning. Regarding site number 32, I do believe this was mentioned, but again, that property is located within the Vaughan Water District, and will serve letters had been provided. And I do believe that it was also mentioned that across the street, both the Kern County High School District and then the Rosedale Union School District have actually, they're the owners of some of those lands, as they believe that there's a potential that schools would be built out across those streets. So the comment that the site is so rural, there's a potential that there will be specific schools built out directly across from that seat, from that property, which is again partly why staff believes it's an appropriate site for development. Regarding site number 35, I would just note, and if we can get the existing zone map on there, because I do want to clarify something for sites number 35. This is the Jenkins and Rosedale property. So part of the reason staff identified this as a potential project, in addition to its location. So if you can see, the property is actually already now zoned MP with an R2 cluster in suspense. So what that means is specifically, right now, without anybody coming to the planning department or to the county or anybody else, additional mobile homes can be constructed there concurrently. Mobile home parks are managed by the state, so we even have limited opportunity to help manage that. Given the fact that this site had already gone through previous histories of changing the zoning to a medium density residential, and the fact that this site has an existing mobile home designation, staff believe that this is an appropriate site for higher density development, as we did hear concerns that the mobile home park may be or not be, I'm not specifying one way or the other, but concerns regarding the management of it. Having a site that is designated and then implemented by the county, we believe would help to address some of the concerns and would be more appropriate, given the fact that right now, if people left after this hearing and a developer came in, they could develop more mobile homes on that property. And then finally, the last item, again, I was going to specify number 2, but again, I already mentioned that that was already designated for higher density development according to the adopted Mojave specific plan. So that completes my comments. I know Ms. Oviatt has a few comments before conclusion.
I'm sorry, Mr. Murphy, you were just talking about number 2 right there at the end in Mojave, or was it? Yes. Okay, and you said that the adopted Mojave specific plan has that for high density residential.
Correct. Yes.
Correct. And then I was looking at the map as well, and on the other side of the street, it looks like it's industrial zoning. And so is that currently the zoning, the industrial? It appeared to be based on what I looked at.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Oviatt, go ahead, please.
Thank you. So I want to bring this back up to why are we bringing this before your board? This is one of the most difficult issues that the planning department has to look at along with your board in regards to housing availability as well as our insufficiency in our housing stock. This is everything from luxury apartments to affordable housing. If it's not zoned, it raises the issue of a 3-year process to go through, and the state of California has put us on notice. There is now a housing enforcement division. They have gone after many cities. I won't go over the fines, but they are significant per month, and then all building permits stop. This is a serious number of letters we've received. Now, it is true that we identified in our 2015 element that we needed to do this rezoning. I would note that my incredibly diligent staff, we looked at over 7,000 individual parcels, 7,000 acres, 880 parcels to get to this group. And this would only provide, the staff recommendation is all of these sites. The Planning Commission has brought you a slightly different recommendation. That would only provide 9,000 units of the 21,000 units we need. And we are at the end of our housing element, and we must now update it starting next year. Now, when people say, well, there's nothing there, and it's this far from grocery stores, I just want to remind you that this is an 8-year cycle. In other words, we're not saying that all of these units would be built next year, although we've had developers step up and say they're ready. This is for the next 8 years. Much can change in 8 years, and the way that this is designed is if the site is not buildable because of a number of things, it won't be built. Your board is under a mandate to zone it. And we have done our best to follow the criteria. We do believe they all meet the criteria. But at this point, it is the market and other situations that will dictate whether it's built. Then we will also, in our housing element, have to justify why we don't have enough units. That's the next challenge. But at this point, we have brought before you 9,100 potential units of the 21,000 units that we are required to produce. So I leave you with those thoughts. We are prepared, Mr. Murphy is prepared to craft whatever motion you need. This is a lot of different moving parts, and we're available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Peters, I just want to ask one question before I go to you. I saw you punched in, and then Supervisor Maggard as well. Just for clarification, staff, and I apologize. I know that you've stated this at least once today, but I want to make sure I have it correct. And some of them I know, but out of this list that we have of items 2 through 37, which were the 6, again, that the Planning Commission recommended not to approve? I just want to, I know 33 and 35 and 32 are among those, and I believe also 19. But what were the other ones? 20, I think, was one. 20 and 26. So if you would list them off, thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure. Chairman Scrivener, members of the board, the items that the Planning Commission recommended denial of were sites 19, site 20, site number 26, site number 32, site number 33, and site number 35.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I did actually have this, but I'm glad I got them cleared up. Okay. Supervisor Peters, please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Scrivener. So I've got a few questions. Number one, just noticing in that list of projects that were recommended for denial, or zone changes that were recommended for denial, 4 of the 6 of those are in a similar area in the 1st District. And so can you provide any context or additional information that the Planning Commission might have provided as to why they denied these? Did they elaborate or share anything?
Supervisor Peters, through the chair. I believe that the commission indicated potential concerns regarding traffic, even though staff does believe that a lot of this has been addressed. I believe that the commission had some concerns about the concentration of the sites regarding where they were located. I believe that that was some of their specific concerns. And then overall, I believe that the commission had some concerns that they did not believe that some of these sites were in areas that were amenable to immediate infrastructure or immediate development. You know, I think the commission looked at some of these sites as a more rural, again, looking at the surface of where the project's located and what the existing developments are that are built around it. And again, I believe that those would be the primary reasons. And again, the only thing I offer is that, you know, when planning is looking at this, we look at what's immediately built now, but we look at what our existing designations and our plan development is. And so I don't know if the commission considered that as much, but I think that those would be the primary reasons why the commission recommended now.
Understood, thanks. So it sounds to me like, you know, I know there's some valid concerns out there, but there's also some significant misinformation, I think. You know, as far as we're not approving projects right now, we're just looking at zone changes and looking into some of these. You know, I hear there's 750 or 1,000 units going in on certain areas, or there's, you know, Section 8 or low-income housing, this type of thing. But just, again, I know we're not approving projects, but just for clarification for the public of kind of what they're looking at, I was wondering if I could ask our applicants to come up. I know we have some in the audience, and just elaborate a little bit more on what their vision is for these areas once this zone change occurs. And just go in numerical order, I'd ask the applicants for number 32 if they could come and share some information. Actually, Mr. Beatty, I asked applicants for number 32. We'll call you guys up right. Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I had them written down wrong. Go ahead.
Hi, staff. Justin Beatty, or Supervisors, Justin Beatty here again. To respond to some of the comments from the neighbors, I think that as far as a site, that's suitable for multifamily development, I think from a peer planning standpoint, everything that Assistant Director Murphy has pointed out, the fact that the North of the River Park District owns the land immediately to the south of us for a future community park. There's a planned high school, junior high, and elementary school in the immediate area. That land is owned by those school districts. We're on the corner of two arterial roads. We have will serve letters for municipal sewer and water. The sewer line right now is a quarter mile away that we can actually access. Other, sometimes you have a project and it's more difficult to access. Ours, we can actually tie into right now. Our site is unique, we feel like, in the fact that the 25 acres that staff had identified is only a portion of our holdings. We own the land that wraps around it. So we own a total of 60 acres there. So our project, in addition to providing a self-imposed buffer where we're gonna have the 10 acres of multifamily on the hard corner of high density, we're gonna surround that with 15 acres of single family homes. And then we have another, whatever the difference on that is, 35 acres beyond that we are also intending to build out in houses. So for all those reasons, and then in addition to that, myself and Joey O'Connell, we personally went and met with the homeowners, or not all the homeowners, but the closest homeowners in their garage, on a Tuesday morning to talk about this project and talk about how we could, produce something that would be acceptable to everybody. And so that's how we came up with a scaled down project. In addition to that, this plan we have here, we did hire an architect and we spent a lot of time thinking about how we could build something that was really nice that would minimize the impact on the neighbors and, we could be proud of. And like my dad said previously, that, we're from Rosedale. My mom's been there whole life. I've been there my whole life. We've been building there for 40 or 50 years. And we just continue, to want to do good projects for the area. And we hope that the supervisors would vote in favor of our project.
Great. Thank you very much. And now if number 33 applicants would share some information as well, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so we're on the corner of Rosedale and Wegas, and we've got a couple of slides for you here to show you what we're trying to, or what we're proposing. The bottom left corner is.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but could you give your name one more time?
I'm sorry,
for that?
Jeff Young. Yeah,
Okay.
Jeff Young.
Thanks.
And Whitney Jackson. So the bottom left is what we're proposing as the duplexes, and surrounded by single-family homes for everything else, with of course the 7-acre park underneath the PG&E easements, power line easements. The duplexes, I think, if we've got some elevations of those as well.
And it will be 32 lots.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
64 duplexes total.
Yes. The duplexes, we're trying to match the architecture of the area, which is kind of a predominantly ranch style, single level construction between 2 and 3 bedrooms. Or there's actually one side's a 2-bedroom, one side's a 3-bedroom. The community will be a gated community with a community pool, a community clubhouse.
Fitness center, other amenities.
I think we had another slide that showed a little bit of that as well.
Yes.
Oh, you can show the floor plan, yeah. So the floor plans that we were looking at are, you can see, as a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom floor plan with on-site parking, garage, covered garages.
And they'll also be market rate.
Market rate, yes. And then there's one more that I believe, I can't remember what was on that one, Whitney.
Yeah, that one just describes the
Oh,
area
not,
a little more.
yeah, the one in your hand there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it'd be about 124 dwelling units total. Like we said, 32 duplexes would be about 64 units, and then 60 single-family units would wrap that, and that serves as a buffer for the higher density, which will also be on the hard corner, which is busier with Wegas and Rosedale intersection.
Okay.
Yes.
And I know that originally there was part of this project that was designated R3, part R2. Would that still be congruent with what your plans are, or would it need to be R2?
Well, this isn't high, I'm going to let you speak to it. This isn't high enough density to be R3, but go ahead, you can speak to it.
Right. If your board wants to recommend approval for the R3 and then R2 for the rest, we would be in acceptance of that. But we just figured zoning the whole site R2 would be more amicable with the neighbors.
Understood. Okay, I appreciate it.
Yes.
I think that's my only question for now. Actually, one more question. I believe, I'm sorry, thank you guys for coming up.
Okay.
I got a question for Lorelei. The project number 35, that is the one on Jenkins, I believe. Did I hear that correctly, or could you restate the zoning or the development that's already there is a mobile home park, and the zoning that's already currently in place for this property would allow basically the state to approve another mobile home park or
Supervisor
something
Peters,
along
that
those
is
lines?
correct. If we could get the map back up. So the site staff is recommending is shown in hashed, which is the red hatched area, if you could mark that. And then, to the west, we have an existing mobile home park that has already been developed. So the property itself right now has a zone classification of MP with an R2CL in suspense. So what that means is that years ago, high-density development was approved on that site that required submittal of a cluster plan. That project was approved. That cluster plan has now since expired. So if anyone ever wanted to build at an R2 level, they would require to process a cluster plan. But that would require a hearing. If someone decided, I don't want to do a cluster plan anymore, and that owner wanted to simply expand the existing mobile home park, they would be allowed to do that as a by right use because the property already has that existing mobile home park designation on it. So our proposal to R3, again, would allow for development at an R3 level, which staff believed that was more appropriate than the existing mobile home park that is there now and that has an entitlement to develop if they got state approval.
Understood, thanks. Chairman Scrivener, that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Maggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 4 projects in the 3rd District, and I have visited them, thoroughly analyzed them, and I have a couple questions about each of them. But my first question has to do with the overall recommendation to us. What happens if we do not approve a specific site that's been recommended for approval?
So our mandate is to provide 214.5, we rounded up, acres of R3, and we are very close. If you adopt the Planning Commission's recommendations, we are insufficient. We will have to go back and try and find other sites. If we are not in compliance, we receive a non-compliance, and our housing element goes into non-compliance. That means that our HUD money is at risk, and all these other things are at risk. So our problem is that we actually, I won't say problem, but we had a lot of other sites, and legitimately, the county is paying for all of this, and so we went to property owners, but we did have a number of property owners that declined to participate in this program. So to be clear, we are not mandating anything to property owners. Anyone who said that they did not want their project to go forward, we withdrew. We would probably go back to them and talk to your board in public session about rezoning it.
Thank you for that explanation. And I don't think we'll know exactly how many acres are affected until we see whether or not some that were recommended for denial are added back in, correct? Okay, so I'll just go through my 4 and let my colleagues do similarly with whatever ones they have. The first one that's up in D3 is number 29, and it is at the corner of Iris and Vine. You have it northeastern corner of Kale Count and iris. But this is due west of the refinery on Manor. And a concern was raised for another one I'll bring up in a second about whether or not any noxious fumes from that refinery could waft their way to the west and come to this area. The predominant wind pattern is northwest to southeast, but it is possible that it could blow the other way. So what are the concerns about that? And are there any implications on the project being in relative proximity to the refinery?
Supervisor Maggart, through the chair. So just like any land use, you are always potentially subject to whatever your surrounding properties have, whether it be animals, whether it be someone else's home, whether it be some potential nearby industrial uses. We try to make sure that those nearby industrial uses are zoned in certain manners that don't create some of those impacts. But I can't stand here today and say that they may or may not ever have any of those impacts come to their property. At least the difference would be is if this got built, those residents that would be utilizing those sites would know what is adjacent to them. I would note on that particular site, and just to give some context in terms of staff's development and identification of this site, is that the existing designation from the general plan perspective has that site designated for medium density residential. So that was part of our factor when we saw that this is basically a little bit of an infill project, that the general plan had it designated for some sort of multifamily use. So it was included in our list, given its location and the fact that it already had some multifamily designation on the general plan.
Okay, thank you. Let's take one step back. I just want to express an overall frustration. This has nothing to do with staff. You guys have done a great job, and you have been tasked with a nearly impossible task to try to meet. But this is one indication of how California is changing from an area where local government made most decisions, and I happen to believe that the best decisions are made at the local level, to an environment where decisions are made at a regional level or sometimes a statewide level. And this is an example of that. We're being told you must designate property for this purpose arbitrarily. It is a one-size-fits-all mandate that we're having to go through, and I find that very frustrating. So this is not a reflection on staff, but it is what it is, and we need to do our best with it. I think that the iris and vine item, this particular site, number 29, reasonably fits within the parameters of what we're trying to accomplish. The next one is item number 30, and it is at Merle Haggard and North Chester. This site is, the other sites are completely blank in D3, but this site is substantially under development now. And it has a wall along the Merle Haggard side to the north and the North Chester side to the east, but there is no existing wall on the west or the south up against the backyards of those other properties. Will it have a wall? For example, we could mandate the placement of garbage containers, we could mandate emergency exits, all kinds of things we could mitigate on a one-by-one, project-by-project basis. But here, we are not allowed to do that, as I understand it, because of at least not to the same extent. So bottom line is, will a wall exist to the west and to the south?
Supervisor Maggard, yes, per our existing development standards, if you build a multifamily unit adjacent to property that is residentially zoned, E or R1, which to the south and west is R1, a 6-foot block wall would be mandatory.
And just so we have this for each of the project sites in D3, you made it clear earlier, you and I have had a long discussion about this, Mr. Murphy, but I want to make sure that my understanding is correct so the public can rest assured of this. If there's a balcony, no balconies will be allowed looking out over into the backyards of adjacent properties. If there is a window, that window must be opaque so you cannot see through it. They can't look down into the backyard or the back windows of the properties that are adjacent to it. Is that correct?
All of that is correct, yes.
Yeah, thank you. And backing up, I forgot to ask about a wall for the previous one, number 29. It is one of the reasons I think it's very well suited is there's a canal to the north, there's a street to the west, but will it also be encompassed by a wall? Based on what you just said, I think it is, but I just want to confirm that for the neighborhood.
I believe so, but I need to see the zoning ordinance real quick, or the adjacent zoning.
I realized I jumped back to 29. I apologize.
So the answer is to the south, you see a lot of that property is zoned R1. There will be a wall required. To the east, the property is zoned R1. There would be a wall required. You have that one portion that's already zoned R2, so it's adjacent to some existing R2. So a wall would not necessarily be mandated right at that particular because it touches multifamily development. But for the proximity, most of it to the south and to the east, the answer is yes.
And how about up against the canal? It seems dangerous to me if we don't have a very strong barrier between that and the canal.
Yeah, there would be protections to protect the canal.
Okay, very good, thank you. The next one in D3 is item number 31. It's a long, well, I guess all of these are, if they're vacant properties, they've been long undeveloped. That's the way God made them, they weren't developed, right? So, yeah. But this is one that if you're aware of the area, you are aware of this kind of peculiar large open area. There were two concerns expressed with this one. One was that it was a San Joaquin kit fox habitat. I don't know that that's the case, and I haven't heard that addressed. Do we know if that's the case?
The entire metropolitan Bakersfield area is habitat, including where we're sitting right now. That would be covered before they would get a grading permit.
Okay.
They would be required to do a survey, and that would have to be taken into account.
Likewise, this property is right across Manor from that refinery. So as you described, any issues related to the refinery are not really pertinent to the approval of this particular site, right?
So the refinery, this is the refinery on Rosedale Highway?
No.
Or is this the Gibson?
On Manor.
On Manor. So the refineries that we have in metropolitan Bakersfield are all changing over from the traditional refining that they were doing into plant-based or other sorts of refining. They have different air emissions, and all of them, I am familiar with, are looking at additional air mitigation. So the types of emissions that we had in the past from these refineries is actually starting to shift. It will take a couple of years for that all to be implemented, but all of these refineries are going to be already tamped down on their emissions or doing different processes that don't have the same kinds of smells and emissions.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Megan, I'm sorry, just to clarify with something as well too.
Yes.
So before your board, you have the opportunity to redesignate that entire site. The Planning Commission, based on staff's recommendation, we were actually only proposing the western portion of that, specifically because we have a 10-acre threshold we were trying to be approximately within because we know for sure that the state would count those. So I apologize to interrupt your comments, but as of the Planning Commission's recommendation, only the western 10 acres was being proposed for redesignation on that site at this time.
So I know it's not a square, but if it were a square, the upper left quadrant is the one we're talking about being affected here.
That is correct.
Yeah, thank you. Now that area is not adjacent as in over the back fence. There are residential properties, but across the street, Bedford Way to the west and East Highland to the north, across the street are R1 areas. So would that likewise have a requirement for a 6-foot brick wall along both Bedford and East Highland?
So the wall would be required for anything to the south, which is zoned R1. Bedford Road, there's a street in between, so adjacent to that is R3. So there wouldn't be a wall necessarily onto the street, but for sure the property that is next to the R1 to the south, a wall would be required.
To the south is an academy. It's not. It might be zoned R1, but it's a private school, and to the south of that is a Catholic church. So there really isn't going to be, in any foreseeable time, residences there. But what concerns me about this particular project is if there is not a brick wall, it will very possibly affect parking, because if people want to, if they can walk directly up to their unit, if it's open to the street on Bedford or on Highland Drive, that means they might park all over that street and on both sides. Those are not wide streets, parking could become an issue. So how do we mitigate against that with the restrictions that we have?
Supervisor Maggart, through the chair, I don't have the number in front of me, but when it comes to our development standards, our zoning ordinance specifies how much parking is required for each unit. So the project, when they would turn in their building permits and grading permits, would have to go through a site plan review, at which point staff would make sure that the required parking based on our adopted zoning ordinance has been provided as part of that site plan review. So the short answer is, based on our existing standards, the site should have sufficient parking to accommodate the residential use.
I know planning standards compel developers to develop that way. That doesn't compel residents to park that way. And that leaves me in a quandary as to whether or not I will support this particular site if we can't have a wall on the north and the west side of that spot.
Supervisor Maggart, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
So I know Mr. Murphy mentioned that we are bringing forward some zoning changes in our development standards. One of them that we are going to be bringing forward is what you're bringing up, which is more walls. The other is if there's existing residential houses next to it, that we also want some sort of screening trees. So that, you know, right now in my backyard, I look over and I may not want to look at a two-story apartment building. We're gonna have some drought-tolerant screening trees that also have to be put in, but we will add the block walls.
So how would, if we approve this today, how would the walls that you're talking about and the landscaping you're talking about still affect this particular project site?
Because it's not developed yet and they haven't brought a site plan forward.
So we would come back and deal with that?
So
I mean,
when
that
they
would be
came
dealt
in,
with.
yes, and that will be coming before your board within the next couple of months.
Thank you. Once that parking issue is mitigated, I'm comfortable with that particular site. Okay, the next one is the one I'm not so comfortable with, and that is item number 36. Orchid Drive, south of DeLea Street, east of Park Meadows Drive. This is very much in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And although there are apartments to the west, there are, it's R1 to the south, to the north, and to the east. This is where the fellow came up, it was Mr. Myrick, and said that he has a problem with drainage. I don't know where Mr. Myrick lives, but I suspect it's to the south or to the east. And he has to, he's had to pump water as it runs onto his property. That's a significant concern of mine. As I stand on Orchid and look to the south, this property appears to fall off, the property descends. And I don't know how we would have to mitigate that so that it doesn't have flooding issues. But Mr. Murphy, you talked about flooding. I think you were talking about this particular property with that comment that Mr. Myrick said. But that's one of my concerns. My other concern is that this very much will impact the character of this neighborhood with R1 properties on three sides of it. You have now addressed it, Ms. Oviatt, but the issue of having a wall along Orchid will be very important so that the parking is in the interior of the project and not the exterior. So what are your comments about that particular one and the consequences of it being surrounded on three sides by R1?
So I'm not clear, certainly can't address why he has this flooding issue and that the property is draining, since we do have Mr. Lux here from Public Works. The rules are you must retain all of your drainage. So these projects will have a sump, or they will clearly not drain onto someone else's property, even with flooding. Not clear what's gone wrong with the speaker's situation, but that is not a standard for development. So this project will have to retain its sump. Second of all, part of our housing element mandate is what's called, it's a word that has been resurrected by HCD and by HUD, which is essentially segregation. Segregation is not what we think of in the past, but what it is the idea that we are concentrating all of our apartments, whether they're luxury or other types of apartments, all in one location, not affording people a sense of neighborhood. And so what creates a neighborhood is a wide variety of different types of housing. So one of the elements that we are required to look at is affirmatively furthering fair housing, which means this very thing, which is changing the character, not just having R1 all in a neighborhood. So from that perspective, we think this is an appropriate site. It won't be an easy site. This will not be an easy site because of the drainage and other sorts of issues. But those are our comments, and we are confident that with the drainage standards that the Planning Department works with Public Works on, that the drainage will be mitigated to retain on that site, whatever that looks like.
Thank you. Is Mr. Myrick still here? I don't know him. I don't believe I've ever talked with him before. Can you help me discover where he lives so we can come back and deal with his drainage issue, Mr. That would be helpful, thank you. So because of the concerns I've raised, this is one I'm not certain that I'm in favor of, and I'll wait to hear what my colleagues say about their specific projects, but this one's a tweener for me.
If I may, Supervisor Maggard and other members of the board, those are some issues that have been raised, as well as we're bringing forward. If there are ones that you are concerned about, we would ask that you refer them back to staff so that we could look at them more closely and perhaps bring them back, or otherwise look at adjoining properties or other sorts of things.
Okay, I look forward to hear from my colleagues, and I'll say something at the end. Thank you very much. Appreciate your good work.
Thank you. Supervisor Perez?
Director Oviatt, do you think it makes sense? Have you heard enough new stuff here today, or, I mean, this is immensely complex, more than I could have imagined, but it does seem as though we can resolve some things today and perhaps need to resolve some things later. In terms of how we proceed, what are you thinking right now?
Well, I think it is, Supervisor Perez through the chair, I think it is specific to each district, but I believe it's a little confusing, but Mr. Murphy has accumulated, as you know, some of the properties have gotten smaller regarding our recommendation. You know, our preference is that you approve the staff recommendation, which actually took the Planning Commission's recommendations and reconfigured them. So rather than the larger projects that we brought before the Planning Commission, they were reconfigured sometimes at suggestions of the applicants. We are also requesting that you not honor giving all R2 to properties. The only thing that counts for the 214 acres is R3 right now. R2 is important, it's special, and it'll count in our next housing element, but right now, the only thing that justifies is R3. If there is some issue, such as been raised, that you feel that this project just doesn't fit for you, we would ask that you refer it back to staff and give us an opportunity to look at it. The other option is to continue an item and have us look at it. Because of our staffing challenges and because of our other challenges, it would be continued into a November hearing. So those are the options before you.
Thank you, Director. So 20, you're contending is a no still, right? Based on, or the Planning Department is contending as a no based on the Planning Commission recommendation?
With all due respect to the Planning Commission, the Planning Department's recommendation is approval. The Planning Commission has brought forward their own thoughts.
Okay, got
And you
it.
have heard other thoughts even since then from the same developers who have now revised their proposals. So the Planning Department would like you to approve all of these with the changes that we have brought forward and that the developers have brought forward. We understand very much all of these concerns.
Okay, well, Lorelei, if possible, then I'm going to ask you to continue 20 so that I can meet with folks and get a better sense of what they're most upset about. I've got a petition with 100 signatures. That's a problem, obviously. The other ones, I did not hear the same kind of passionate opposition, 17, and then 21 through 25, and of course 37. Can you comment on that?
Supervisor Perez, I don't think I understand the second half of your question. We did hear your potential request to continue item 20, which would allow you time to, it would also allow us time to more completely brief you and perhaps the residents on the kind of development standards that would be implemented.
That's my hope, is to get on the same page about that. The other items did not seem as problematic based on today's testimony. Is that your sense, or did I miss something? We had a lot of public input.
It is my sense that haven't been a lot of issues raised on those other sites.
That was my sense. Okay, so as to 20, I would just like some time to, in particular, meet with Ms. Crawley, who was here, and meet with her folks and get a better sense of where they're at and how they're feeling, and see if we can, move the needle. Otherwise, the other ones seem good to me. I'm not saying I'm gonna support that project. I'm saying I want to sit down and learn more about it. I need to get into the weeds. Those are my thoughts, Lorelei. Is that possible?
So our recommendation, since this is one item, is that we continue to hear your thoughts, and then we can craft a motion that includes specific decision-making throughout. So we have made a note that your request is that Site 20 be included in a motion for a continuance. We would be looking at November 29th board for any continuances.
Okay, great. Well, you know where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Couch.
Thank you. I'm going to go in reverse order from the ones that were not recommended by the Planning Commission. And I have to admit, 35 is the one that I did not get a chance to really investigate. So let's skip that for a second. 33, can you all come back up, the applicants, for a second? Does your, you requested, or you were requested to have R3 and R2. You all said, fine with you, but you're really going to use, only going to use the all R2 would be fine.
Yes.
For your needs.
Yes.
So stay there just in case this gets worse. If R3 is granted, but they don't build what's allowed on R3, does that help? Is that helpful to your needs with the state requirement?
Well, they personally may not build it, but at some point, if they build R2, it will make it more attractive. There'll be roads paved, and at some point in the 8-year cycle, someone will build it. So right now, our proposal is 8 acres of R3, 32 acres of R2, correct?
And your parcel, or your project is the one with the park under the power lines on
Yes.
the south side?
Yes, sir. It's the north side. The
north side.
The north side. South side is Rosedale Highway.
I understand.
Okay, that's right. That puts the R3 closest to Rosedale?
Yes, corner.
Okay, further away from the existing homes, not the homes that you would build, but existing homes.
Yes.
Correct?
It'd be on the actual northeast corner of Wegas and Rosedale.
Yes.
Okay.
And then wrapped with single family, which is then buffered by the park, and then existing homes, like half a mile away.
I'm going to try to support my friend, Mr. Peters down there, but I think I'm okay with that. And I appreciate the offer. If, so I understand, making it all R2 isn't of any benefit to what you want to do. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next one on the way down is 32. And full disclosure, I met with Mr. Beatty and Mr. Beatty and Mr. O'Connell, and I think they have an outstanding project proposed, and I look forward to seeing that happen. I hope it does. 26. Well, I'll stop there. I'll stop there on the other, and since Supervisor Perez has questions on 20, I won't even address that. Thank you. I don't know if that helped or moved the ball forward.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other comments, so I'll go ahead and ask some questions that I have. I want to start with project 19 on the list, please. So this one, if I have this correct, the Planning Commission recommended against this project, but staff is recommending that we approve it. And have there been modifications on this one from staff? I didn't catch that. If we did, this looks like we're changing 3 parcels of rural residential to HR.
There have been no modifications by staff for that site.
Okay, so thanks.
Approximately 31 acres.
And we had one member of the public, Mr. Padilla, that spoke in opposition to the project. And so what were, in general, the comments of the folks that attended the Planning Commission regarding that? I obviously heard his testimony today, but I'm just trying to get a sense for why the Planning Commission recommended against this one.
The general sense on that particular one was just the surrounding uses, more rural in nature, and concerns over traffic and just trying to fit that type of development to that location.
And what was staff's thought process on including this? I mean, is this something that was in a general plan or specific plan? Because the zoning is different, obviously.
So part of the idea here is that this area does have potential for water availability from a public water system. It is 3 separate parcels. So it may be 31 parcels total, but it's 3 separate parcels. And we cannot count more than 10 acres on one site for our R3 for our 214. So honestly, we looked at these 3 parcels, we talked to the property owner. It may not develop now, probably won't develop for 10 years, but it is moving in that direction. And remember that we're not necessarily planning for housing for tomorrow, we're planning eventually. And you can see that it's right on the border with the city of Bakersfield. So
Yeah,
it
I
could
did see
get
that.
water, it could get sewer. When you look around, this is like 1996 at Allen Road, and look at what Allen Road looks like now. So I think that part of our thought was that we get ahead of the R3 and these 3 parcels. That was
Okay.
our thought.
Thank you. And then the 2 projects generally in the Mojave area, Project 2 and Project 3, that there were speakers here on those 2 items. I'm going to start with number 3. Give me a second. I apologize. I need to go back and find the map. Perhaps you have one that you can put up as well. Okay, I'm on. Okay, I found 2. But actually I wanted to talk about 3 first. Sorry. All right. Okay. Thank you. That's the one you have on the screen there? Okay, yeah, the one I've got it. So, okay, so this is on what is this, Business 58? and in the Mojave area. And so those existing land uses around there have got single-family residential, and then you have an industrial zone site that's adjacent to it. Correct? Okay, so okay, so just walk me through your thinking, because we did have a couple of folks that were actually three that expressed concerns on this one.
So once again, this particular project is, for Eastern Kern would be considered infill. Obviously, we are near downtown. We have Mojave, this is not part of the adjudicated basin, so Mojave PUD has water, we have sewer. It is next to industrial, but it is also part of a residential area. We do have limitations in Mojave because of the Mojave Air and Spaceport. There are many, many areas that we cannot build any residential because we're putting research and development into space. So we have a really difficult time finding locations in that area because of the very, very large airport land use plan for space flight, which is unique and is much, much larger than anything we have even for Meadows Field, where we're bringing in 747s. So that's why we identified this site. We think it makes a good companion piece for apartments, not necessarily low income. They could also be apartments for the Mojave Air and Spaceport. There is nothing in anything that we're doing today that mandates that they are low income. These are for all income levels, depending on the financing and depending on the developer.
And this is one the Planning Commission recommended for approval?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Now let's go to number 2. This site I have more concerns about, just in light of what I know to be out there. Currently, there's very limited existing development, and so I heard you say that this piece, although it's zoned currently, what is it? It doesn't. I don't know if I can see. What is this? Estate residential? Is that what that is? What is it?
No, it's actually zoned for high density residential.
Well, it says proposed R3, but it's currently RS.
Yes, I understand that.
Sorry, I was on the wrong map. So it's currently RS.
Yeah, I apologize. It is inconsistently zoned, and I'm not allowed to leave an inconsistently zoned. For a variety of reasons, it was not fixed.
Explain that to me.
So the density underneath is higher.
In the general plan?
Yeah, and the general plan is higher than the zoning on top. And recent, once again, recent decisions by the legislature, this is one of the things that identified in the housing element, and that's called downzoning. So one of the issues over the years has been where you have R2 and R3 zoned properties, and people come in and build at an R1 level. The state has now said that invalidates your housing element, and you have to not allow that anymore. So we identified this. Admittedly, it is farther away from a variety of uses, but everything in Mojave, they only have one grocery store, so it is far from many of the uses. And we just believe that since it was already designated for high-density residential, we should just designate it and see where the community goes in the next 8 to 16 years. That was our thought.
Thank you. Supervisor Peters?
Thank you, Chairman Scrivener. I wanted to go back to, I believe it was 26. I think we had a couple representatives here from that project. I was wondering if I could get just a little bit more detail about kind of what the vision is for that piece.
Absolutely. Todd Wood with DeWalt Corporation. So we've been working with our client who's here today for about the last year and a half on this project. Unfortunately, I don't have the concept plan here today, but we have been looking at, initially we were looking at doing a zoning change up to R2. When this process started where it was identified to go up to R3, we were like, okay, this is perfect, fits our needs perfectly. So the concept is to do meet the 20 dwelling units per acre. It's going to be What we're proposing to do are duplex, well, townhouses, two-story townhouses. They're in banks of like 4, if you will, running for, facing north and south, running from east to west as you kind of just stack through the project. We do understand that Brimhall Road's an arterial. Verdugo, I think at the north end might be a local, but we will be doing all the full street improvements. We understand we have to do a signal modification. There is sewer already extended up Verdugo from the city, so we've been in contact with Public Works. So we've got, commitments. We don't have the will serve letter, obviously, because we don't have the final plan, but we will get service from the city through CSA 71.
Understood. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, I don't have any other questions on that, but just hearing what I've heard, it seems like a lot of the concerns that I've been hearing have been pretty well addressed, and I won't speak for any of my other colleagues, but as far as the ones in the first district, I'm supportive of staff's recommendations.
Supervisor Maggard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to make sure I have the number right. Project number 36, I would like to refer back to staff.
Thank you. Any other comments from members of the board? Okay.
Supervisor Scribner, I have a question though for Mr. Maggard.
Yes, sir.
Site 31, what was your opinion on that? Was one you had brought us some concerns. Was that one you were recommending move forward or
I'm fine going
continuance?
forward, yes. I'm fine going forward on 31. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Couch?
I don't, if you're going to craft a motion, I'm unclear on what we're going to do with 20. Is it referred back? No.
Yeah, this is the one that Supervisor Perez was talking about. Supervisor Perez, what was your, just for clarification, what was your desire on that one?
On,
Item 20?
I stated it to the planning department.
Well, there was a question, so I
Oh,
just
okay,
want
I'm
to get
so sorry.
clarification.
I missed that. Yeah, well, I need to meet with the residents. I need to talk with them. And
So, thank you. Just
Yeah,
to
thank you.
clarify for Supervisor Couch, we would be including in a recommendation a continuance to November 29th for item 20.
So
Thank you, Director.
We're not continuing all of them. It's not a big package. You're
No,
continuing.
he's crafting individual recommendations for each one of these, and he's going to read that into the record. So you should listen for
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
your numbers to make sure that we're crafting it correctly. And then it's one motion at that point, if that's acceptable to County Council. Yes? Okay, all right.
Okay, so at this time, I'll ask Mr. Murphy to read his recommendation as he has it currently, based on the input from the board.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, what we're going to do is we're going to go through kind of easy to the more difficult ones. Well, not difficult, but as we got it. So the first recommendation is that case number 20 be continued until your November 29th board meeting. The second action is that case number 36 be referred back to staff. The recommendation would then be to approve amendments to the general plan and the specific plan as recommended. Oh, I'm sorry, I do need one more clarification before I can move forward, and it has to do with, which was the site, the 10 acres versus the R2? Mr. Wood,
Oh, 20.
which district?
Whose district?
10 acres.
Yeah, I just need to make sure. Supervisor Perez, I'm sorry, I have one clarification I need from you.
Okay,
This is for site number 21.
okay.
So when staff went to Planning Commission, we only recommended the southern 10 acres be rezoned and designated at R3 level. You heard today that the project applicant was asking for that to still happen, but that they actually wanted the northern 10 acres to be zoned and designated at the R2 level. This is another one that we have not had a whole lot of controversy on, but the original Planning Commission recommendation was just that 10 acres. I needed clarification whether you were comfortable having the northern 10 acres be zoned and designated at the R2 level as well.
What are your thoughts?
R3. Our staff recommendation.
Yeah, what's your recommendation?
Well, the original recommendation was only for the 10 acres on the R3, but we are comfortable having that northern 10 acres be designated at the R2 level.
Well, you're the expert, so thanks.
Okay, so 21. Let me just double check. If you give me just 1 minute, because I got to craft one for that item specifically.
Our goal at the beginning of this process was 214.5 acres of R3. Could you give us a sense of, with the motion as it's crafted, how many acres are left?
We're going to be close. We don't know yet,
Okay, thank you.
but we will rise to the occasion.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I think I am now ready to provide your commission with the your board with the recommendation. So again, the recommendation is item number 20, be continued until November 29th, 2022. The recommendation for item number 36 is to refer that project back to staff. The recommendation would then be to approve amendments to the general and specific plan as recommended, enact ordinance approving changes in zone classification as recommended, and adopt resolutions as recommended findings for cases 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 17, 23, 24, 25, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 34, 37. We will also be taking those same actions, approve the amendments in the general specific plan as recommended, enact ordinance approving changes in zone classification as recommended, and adopt resolutions as recommended for items 19, 26, and 35. Additionally, for item number 21, the recommendation would be to approve amendments to the general plan and specific plan as recommended, enact an ordinance approving changes in zone classification as recommended, and adopt resolutions as recommended. What would happen for item number 21 is that staff would recommend, or the recommendation is to change the general plan from SR to HR on 10 acre, the southern 10 acres, a zone change from E1/2 RS to R3 on that same southern 10 acres, an amendment to the general plan from SR to HMR on the northern 9.55 acres, and a change in zone classification from E1/2 RS to R2 on the northern 9.55 acres. And then finally, for sites number 32 and 33, the specific request or decision would be to approve a GPA from ER to HR on 10 acres, and then a GPA from ER to LMR on 15.41 acres, a zone change from A to R3 on the 10 acres, and a change in zone classification from A to R1 on 15.41 acres, as presented by staff. And then finally, for site number 33, again, going back to the original planning department's recommendation, a recommended approval for the general plan amendment from UER to HR on 8 acres, and then a GPA from UER to HMR on 30.23 acres, a change in zone classification from A to R3 on 8 acres, and then a change in zone classification from A to R2 on 30.23 acres. And that would be the motion.
Can you say it again? I missed it.
Never say that.
Anything else, Ms. Oviatt? Okay. All right, so staff has a recommended motion. Do we have anything from the board?
I'll make a motion on staff's recommendation.
Your motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Thank you. That brings us to the conclusion of our agenda. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to October 11th at 9 a.m.
So moved.
We are adjourned.